Hey everyone, Andrew here. Before we get rolling, as you can probably tell from the title of this episode, Derek and I are sharing our initial impressions of NBA 2K21. During the show, we do note that we reserve the right to change our opinion as we continue to play the game, but on top of that, a hotfix for shooting on Rookie, Pro, and All-Star difficulty, but not the high difficulties or online play, has actually come through. In fact, it actually came through right as we wrapped up recording, and that's not the first time that's happened with us in breaking news. As such, we obviously weren't able to cover that on the show, and to that point, we actually make a few references to the possibility of getting such an update as we share our opinions. Needless to say, we'll be talking about that in next week's episode as we continue to chat about NBA 2K21 now that it's out. But I did want to give everyone a heads up on that and why we don't address it. Unfortunately, it came through too late for us to chat about this week, but it will be part of the conversation moving forward. With that being said, thank you very much and enjoy the show. From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, episode number 339. Andrew with you once again, joined once again by Derek, aka D4 in the forum.
No, I'm happy to be here. A little disappointed in a couple things, which we'll get into. Disappointed in the release of NBA 2K21. Disappointed in NBA Playgrounds 1, which we haven't talked about yet. The original NBA Playgrounds. So, yeah, it's been a rough couple days in basketball gaming.
It has been, and it's also a very big week, and some very big news came out. And of course, you talked about this on your YouTube channel, so we will be covering that. Anything we don't cover, I encourage people to check out Derek's YouTube channel, which of course is D4 on YouTube. The virtual hoop dreams that we will also be covering that news as well. But yeah, it's certainly a big week in basketball gaming with the release of 2K21, with the news about Scott O'Gallagher and Rob Jones that we'll be getting into this week, and of course a couple other things if we have time that we've been playing. So as always, a lot to talk about. But then again, we always find a lot of things to talk about on this show.
Exactly. Sometimes we just have to table ideas. Otherwise, the show would go 4, 5, 6 hours. So,
10-part series.
The good thing is that we've been consistent and we produce it weekly, and people seem to be enjoying the show.
Absolutely, and of course, you look forward to our version of The Last Dance. So it's just us for 10 hours talking about basketball games in a 10-part series.
Yeah. And, hey, if we ever had to do or wanted to do a marathon podcast for charity, go for 24 hours.
A stream.
I guarantee it could fill up 24 hours of basketball gaming discussion.
I'm sure we could. We might be hallucinating by the end of it. We might be both tired and missing out on work or things like that. But yeah, we could do it.
Yeah, people, fans of the show, if you want something like that, give us a good cause. I'd be interested to try it. A lot of energy drinks, a lot of coffee, and like I said, I bet we could fill up the time.
Something for Patreon, maybe, or maybe our OnlyFans.
Exactly. Yeah, get away from the you-know-what content, and let's get something out there a little bit more wholesome, Andrew.
I mean, that's what the people want. So, this is sure, she's pretty, but, what about my basketball games? That's what people really want to hear about online. But it doesn't, in fact, seem that people do want to hear about basketball games. Of course, we had the discussion in the forum. We want to encourage everybody to get into that, and we want to have some more gameplay discussion this year and really get back to talking about sliders and tips and impressions and everything else. So with the release of NBA 2K21, please feel free to jump into our forum and get involved with the discussion there. Of course, we will be continuing to talk about NBA 2K21 for, well, I guess months to come, Derek. I mean, it is the new game out, and we do this podcast every week, so I'm sure it will have plenty of material beyond our initial impressions.
Yeah, exactly. And just because, this is the first time where we've had releases like this months apart, we're going to be talking about all the NBA 2K21 issues, all the 2K, for PS4 and PC and whatnot, and Xbox One. We're going to be talking about all of that and the ongoings with that version. And then just a couple months down the road, we're going to be having all of these previews and announcements, gameplay trailer, all of that stuff for the PS5 version, and then all of that discussion. So basically, a show going out every week is a absolute certainty.
No doubt. And with that in mind, NBA 2K21 current gen is out right now. The current gen version in this case refers to, of course, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and also Nintendo Switch, Google Stadia, which we don't really cover on the site that much. It's not really a platform that I look into, and of course PC. And people say that PC is not any kind of generation relative to consoles, but it is the port of the PS4 X1 version. So for the moment, the PC is also part of the current gen lineup, so to speak. We've talked about that at length before. It is out. I've got 2 copies of the game, Derek, although I've only got one at the moment, the PC version, which I loaded and have been playing. The PS4 version I pre-ordered. I actually pre-ordered it the day before release. This is the latest I've ever pre-ordered basketball games. Simply out of just forgetting about it and realizing, oh, that's right, the game is out this week. Which kind of goes with the whole abbreviated preview season, I feel. But I do have the PC version, which I've been playing. Of course, you and I played a game a couple of days ago from when this is going to come out, which we'll get into in due course. My PS4 version is also on the way. Monday or Tuesday, I'm expecting it. So I do double dip for both modding and online gaming purposes. So yeah, we have the game. The current gen version is out. A lot of impressions flying around on social media and in forums, and on our forum and OS, and of course Reddit and Twitter and whatnot, Derek. So let's get into what we think about the game.
Yeah, this is even a rougher release than 2K20 as far as the feedback goes. And I think that one of the biggest problems that I have is I did this demo impressions video where I had some positives. One of the positives was shooting. I gave other positives to the game as well. And it felt a lot better than what we ended up getting. The demo version felt a lot better than what we ended up getting on the PC, PS4, etc. when the game actually released. And obviously we didn't get a demo for the PC, but I played the demo on PS4. So the point that I want to make is this is not a new occurrence. Remember, this happened in 2K18.
Yeah.
In 2K18 we had a demo that felt pretty good on the sticks. I reviewed the demo. There were defensive issues, but overall it felt pretty good. First steps felt good. The skating didn't seem as bad, etc. And then when we got the 2K18 release, we were like, what is this? And I think you echoed some of those sentiments as well. You were like, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't feel like the same game that I played in the demo.
I mean, that is a recurring problem with early access to games. Sometimes the early access is rougher and not indicative of the final version in what's ultimately a good way, because the final version feels more polished. Other times it is most definitely goes the other way, where you quite like the demo, that first look, the prelude or whatever, and then play the full version and realize, ooh, this isn't what I wanted. And having gone to some community events for NBA Live in the past and actually playing early beta, pre-alpha versions or whatever of these games, and then playing the full version later, there have been times when I've actually felt like what I played at the community event was actually a tighter game. That something has happened between when I played it and gave it the feedback, along with the other people at the event, of course, and the actual release of the full version. You're kind of like, well, what happened? You were on the right track at the community event. That pre-release version was great, and now you've kind of taken a step back. And it's the same kind of thing. And you look at how this works with the demos. That was an old build. We mentioned that in our demo impressions because that was confirmed by Beluba that it was an old build. But it was the most solid build they had at the time to put out there as a demo, obviously. And things have happened since then.
Yeah. Said that to you on the last podcast. I said one of my worries, because this was before the official game was released, one of my worries is when you said that it was built on an old build. Yep. You said that it was old build, and I said that because I said, what happens if we get the game again, and like we have in the past, and what happens when we get the game and it feels completely different. And you and I will get into this. We played a game against each other, which I posted on YouTube as well, and my greatest fears were realized.
Yep. In
that one game that you and I played. And everything basically that I complimented the demo on as improvements over 2K20, all of it is now a moot point, because now we have the official release and it is not what we experienced on the demo.
And that is the unfortunate thing about that first look, whether it's a demo, whether it's getting able to experience the game at a community event or a Gamescom, some kind of gaming event that has that first look, that whether it actually represents the final product, for better or worse. Sometimes it is improved by the time it comes out, other times it takes a step backwards, or something has changed that doesn't please everybody, as the case may be. And we're not alone in having our quibbles with the game. There are things that perhaps do feel better. The other thing, the main thing with the game, and people have pointed this out, is that modes like My League, for example, although it does have a very nice new feature, which we'll mention momentarily, a mode like My League and even My Team to some extent has been impacted obviously by the current pandemic, which is not 2K's fault, and it is the way things are with the NBA being delayed until this time with the playoffs, with the shutdown and the restart. There are some things that are out of their control, although with that in mind, maybe the NBA should have said, hey, let's push the release date of the game back until we actually have the new season. So it's kind of on the NBA on that one, because the NBA is the one that determines the release dates for these games. So I do kind of blame the NBA for that one as well. But that is something that's beyond 2K's control, obviously. But it's the other things. It is the shooting mechanics, the dribbling mechanics, the feel, the player movement. That and some of it is learning curve, yes, as we will get into. But at the same time, I'm not liking, Derek, how I'm seeing a lot of people make excuses for the game and just saying, oh, you're trash, get good. The same excuses we see every year whenever there's any kind of criticism of the games. And it's all, oh, you're just not good at the game, you're complaining. And yes, some people are, but the problems go beyond a learning curve or difficulty. Because as I said on Twitter, when you brought up this point, just before we started recording, in fact, I'm fine with a learning curve and difficulty and trying new things, but when those mechanics don't work out properly and there's no rhyme or reason and there's clearly an issue with the overall concept and execution of that concept, that's what I have a problem with. Learning curve is fine, broken mechanics are not.
I want to make a point really quick before I jump into that. The broken mechanics, the issues with shooting, the issues with player movement, the broken acceleration and speed and all of that stuff. People are starting to speak up about this, and it's really nice to see that people are making their voices heard. They're talking about, as you mentioned, My Team, they're talking about how these gameplay issues are dramatically affecting the experience in modes like My Team, in offline play now, in My League, and and when you're playing against a human locally and all of that stuff. Like, people are, I've seen more comments than ever so far this year since the release, where people are like, we need a different gameplay system. You know what I mean? One for online and one for offline modes. And, the offline mode one would also be for My Team in general. And the thing is that the gameplay mechanics are so tuned for that online play, for the single player usage, for playing in the park and all of that stuff, that they're so tuned for that they don't factor in the 5-on-5 experience. But I also want to make another point on that as well. And when I say 5-on-5 experience, I mean offline, and I mean like your My Team play and all of that.
Non-player lock, yeah.
Right, not exactly, non-player lock experience. But I also want to point out, even online, as far as playing in the park and all of that stuff and building up your character, these players on the floor do not move like human beings. They do not move like athletes. Changing direction is clunky no matter which mode you're in. That's not fun. Change of direction is clunky. Your speed and acceleration is breaking constantly. You try to execute a first step and your guy goes in slow motion and then just randomly speeds up. You go to take a shot and you get the shot right in the zone, in the window, right in the middle of the window for the meter, and you brick it. And then the next shot that you take, you're outside of the window and you make it. And this happened when you and I were playing against each other. You drive into the hoop. And this is not just, this is the gameplay overall. It impacts all modes. You drive in to the hoop and you go up for a shot and suddenly somebody gets sucked from the side into you and blocks the shot, or you get sucked into them. And it's the most unnatural, unfeeling, a poor feeling control that you can have in a basketball game. And I also want to point out, when you don't have control, what happens? You don't have fun. If you don't have control over the action, if you don't have control over your player, etc., you're not going to have fun. And, I brought this up on that thread, and, 2K doesn't need to worry about a great first impression anymore.
No.
And I posted Thunder Shack's 0 for 19 Peja Stojakovic shooting, right? They don't need to worry about a good impression anymore because they're the only player in the space. They're the only company in the space, and they know that people are going to buy the game because, as we talked about before, they want their virtual hoops fix. So people want their virtual hoops fix. So people can go into these games, they can buy the game, and they can put it on, and they can shoot 10% from the floor, 10 to 15% from the floor, and they can be like, wait a minute, what is going on? I feel like I'm shooting it right. Why do these mechanics not make sense? And guess what? They still bought the game. They're going to keep the game. Why? Because it's the only sim basketball game 5-on-5 in the space.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the user tags on Steam for NBA 2K21, but once again, the psychological horror tag has made its way back into the Steam reviews in the Steam tag section, which maybe aptly describes the reaction that many of us have to the game when we have the frustrations with the legacy issues year after year. And yeah, shooting does seem to be the big problem, and it is one that people are writing off as get good, and you just don't know how to play the game. Even cover player Damian Lillard has come out and said, has anybody figured out this shot meter? So you've got the cover player of the game complaining about the game and not having positive impressions to share about the game. And funnily enough, people are talking about how he's trash and everything on the sticks. Which and of course, just because you do play professional basketball doesn't mean you can play virtual basketball. But he is not the only one to have these concerns. And the problems, as you alluded to, and as you demonstrated in that video, as we collectively demonstrated in that video that you posted of the game we played, is that the mechanics, like we understand the mechanics. We understand you don't play with the shot meter, but you could see my shot meter because we played, which was interesting, obviously, that we played it that way. With the shot meter, it has the good zone and it has the perfect release point. The perfect release point is the green release. Anything else, either side of that, is supposed to be a good release, a high percentage release that's less than perfect, not guaranteed to go in, but it is again as a good release. And a lot of the shots that I was getting in the good release zone were missing. And you had a lot of shots, including layups, and free throws, where I was outside of that zone were going in, and it felt like missing the zone. If I didn't get a green release, that actually missing the good zone was better than actually getting into the good zone, which is conceptually illogical. And this reminds me a lot of 2K18's shooting and the way it was nerfed, and how much of a mistake I thought that was. And at the time, people were saying, oh, you just don't get the mechanics, or you just need practice. Practice, sure. Learning the mechanics, yes. But conceptually, that doesn't make sense. Conceptually, that is a system that is not working properly. Because the whole point is, again, that good release zone is supposed to be not a perfect release, not 100% like a green release, but still the high percentage shot. And yet, when you're making more of the shots outside of that range, then the mechanics aren't working properly. And that, I think, is what Damian Lillard is probably alluding to. It's what a lot of people are talking about. It's what you and I have observed. And again, you're not playing with the meter, but seeing my releases with the meter, with me having the meter on, it just bears that out.
You had 2 free throws with Dennis Rodman during the game, and the first one that you took was like right in the middle of the window, and it missed. Your second free throw was outside of the window to the left, and it went in. If that doesn't tell you that it's random, I have the full game. I recorded the full game. And if anybody wants to see that, I can probably upload it and show it to them. But that tells you everything you need to know about the shooting. Again, it's not about getting good. It's not about being nice. It's not about getting back into the practice gym or anything like that. If the mechanics are flawed, if the engine within the game doesn't work right, then you are literally going to have problems, and you're going to have frustrations, and you're not going to be able to master that system. And also, I want to point out, the game needs to appeal to everybody, right? That's the goal. The goal is to appeal to all different types of gamers, and I think you remember me saying that on Virtual Hoop Dreams when I was talking. Yep. You need to be able to give a great first impression for those people who just pick up the game every once in a while, who maybe aren't truly in tune to basketball, maybe not huge fans of the game, and you need to be able to, you need to be you have good gameplay and a good first impression for those who are incredibly experienced and those who are just in the middle. And the problem is that it doesn't get
elitism.
Well, it doesn't. The thing is, Andrew, though, it doesn't even get it. It's not even a good game for those people either. It's not even a good game for the elitists. It's not even a good game for quote unquote hashtag Sim Nation. Like it's not even that. Like the player movement, the shooting, all of that stuff. It's not functionally correct. It's not fun to play. It's not reactive. One thing that I wanted to point out in the game, sorry if I'm rambling here, but one thing that I wanted to point out in the game that you and I went against, there were several where we went against each other. There were several times where you made a pass out to the perimeter and you should have been able to just catch and go up with a shot. And same with me when I caught the ball with Bird or Havlicek, you would pass the ball out to the perimeter, and the delayed catch animation, the heavy catch animation that happened allowed me to recover on you from the paint.
Yeah.
Where I was
waterbugging
in order to close on the shoot. Yeah. So how is that a basketball, a realistic or sim basketball aspect of the game where you can do a routine swing to the perimeter and it takes so long for your guy to catch it and then go into your shot that by the time that you do, the defense is there? What's the point of running plays? What's the point of trying to get your men open? And how does that impact the feel?
I mean, people are talking about the skill gap, right? But there's still so many animations in the game, so many moments like that, like heavy catch, a bad catch, a time when the animation is chosen, that's what determines your success, that it's no longer about the input. It's about whether the game has given you a good animation or whether the mechanics have worked properly. It's no longer about a skill gap because the game has to adequately reward skill. And I'm not sure that it does at the moment. I mean, if people are getting green releases constantly and they've mastered that, then I suppose that is where the skill gap comes in. But there's so many other things that are problematic with the shooting. And we were talking about it before we started recording, and it goes back to what we were saying on Twitter, that, look, if I fail with the shooting mechanics, if my input is bad, my timing is bad, if I fail to play the game well, and I therefore fails to succeed, then yeah, that's fine. That's on me. And of course, it's frustrating because I want to play the game well and I want to win. But if I can see that that's been my mistake and that I'm not doing a good enough job with the shooting mechanics, then that's fair enough. But when I see myself succeeding when I shouldn't and failing when I shouldn't, that it doesn't seem to line up, that my poor releases seem to be better than my good releases, then that's frustrating because it feels like even though we are succeeding, we both shot a decent percentage from three and in the paint and everywhere else. We were able to score. I mean, with 8-minute quarters, I think, what was the final score? Something like 85 to 72 or something, 74 or something?
It was 85 to 78, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, with shorter quarters, that's still we still scored a respectable amount of points. We were knocking down threes and mid-range and finishing in the paint and everything. So it's not like we couldn't use the system, but there were so many times when it felt like the system wasn't working properly or consistently. And that's the issue that we have, and the issue that I think a lot of people have, including, it seems, the cover player himself, possibly, that it's not that we can't grasp the mechanics. And look, maybe there are people out there that are better at timing than us. In fact, I'm quite certain there are. But with that being said, it's not about that. It's about seeing how the mechanics are supposed to work, how they're sold to us as how they're supposed to work, and how they actually are working. That is the problem. And shooting just doesn't feel... There's something that just doesn't feel right about shooting. And it's you can keep these mechanics as far as the shot meter and everything. Like I don't think it's the problem with the controls. It's not the way they're working. It is the tuning as far as percentages for good releases versus poor releases and how the good zone works and things like that. The tuning for that, I feel, is the big problem. And I know that gets into the whole issue of buffing things for people who aren't learning mechanics. But again, if I'm making free throws...
the mechanics aren't good. The mechanics don't work the way they're supposed to. So
well,
it's
that's
not
the thing,
about to cater to a fan base. It's fixing, or a struggling fan base. It's not that. It's that there's a reason. It's not mechanically sound. It doesn't work the way it is supposed to, and it's random. That's not like a skill thing. That's a system fault.
Well, it goes back to last year in 2K20. There was that issue with late releases that if you just held down the the shot stick, the pro stick, or the shoot button, and just kept it down and had the latest possible release, there was a bug where you could make 4 or 5 shots in a row doing that. And if you go into a my court, for example, in my career, and just shooting around, you can hit a lot of shots just by doing ultimate late releases. And that was a problem. And we're seeing the same thing now this year, where the good releases have lower chances, or it feels like it. It certainly seems that. And again, if I'm just hitting the good zone and not green releases, then yes, my shooting percentages should be realistic. But I should also be making more shots in that good zone than out of that good zone. And as you can see from the video that you posted of the game we played, I'm making a lot of shots that I shouldn't. So my percentages are being buoyed by shots that I shouldn't be making, and lowered by shots that by missing shots that I should be making.
Yeah, I have to laugh at the the whole layup meter thing.
Yeah,
I mean, I have to laugh at how, and again, this goes back to the whole skill thing. On that video, and I'm going to be uploading video later of me against the computer as well on NBA 2K21. I played a game using the Pelicans versus the Rockets, and you go in there and it's just completely random. There's layups you make on that video where the layup, the meter, you are completely outside the zone. Like, you're not even close to the window. It's wildly, and same with me on the video. There's shots we're making at the rim where we're not even close to the window and they're going in. And then there's layups like you with Derrick Rose where you're right at the rim and you're right near the window and it misses.
Yeah.
And I have to laugh. People, this is why I say it is broken. The layup meter, timed layups are broken. The outside shooting is broken. The aiming doesn't feel like real hoop. It doesn't feel like you're really shooting a basketball. That's why I have to laugh at the whole Sim Nation aspect of, get good. This is Sim basketball, blah, blah, blah. No, there's nothing realistic feeling about using that right stick to aim and shoot at the hoop. And I've demonstrated, just like I did, in my video, in the demo impressions video, I've demonstrated with the right stick. I can shoot with the right stick. I can get green releases with the right stick and all of that stuff. That doesn't mean that it's mechanically sound, and it doesn't mean that it's realistic or sim. And the other point that I wanted to make off of what you just said, and I said this in that thread on Twitter as well, and I think you appreciated this. The thing is that when you feel like you're competing against the game and the game is competing against you and you're not competing against another player or team or human, that's when there's a huge problem. And there's just a minefield of issues that you're trying to navigate around, and you don't feel like you're really playing basketball. You don't feel like you're playing, a fun game of virtual hoops. And the issues with the player movement and whatnot means you don't have control. So, when you and I were playing, I felt like we were constantly trying to dodge a minefield of gameplay issues, and then the results that we were getting were often incredibly random.
I think that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, it is, because with
people to understand we had success.
Yeah.
Right? Like, sorry, I'm rambling.
But it didn't feel good. That's the thing, is the underlying thing is that it didn't feel good, that we didn't feel like, that success came from us making good plays, good basketball plays, and good video game input. Whether you're talking about basketball strategy or stick skills, our skill with the controller and our input on the game, or our knowledge of basketball and employing those techniques on the virtual hardware here, didn't come down to that. It's the things that we tried that should have worked didn't, and of course they shouldn't work every single time, because that wouldn't be sim, that wouldn't be realistic. But they didn't work. It's the consistency and how those mechanics work is the underlying point we're trying to make here. And player movement. How many times I stepped out of bounds just trying to make a move because of the heavy movement. And how many times
I just dropped the ball.
Yeah, things like that. Yeah, and the legacy issues with cheap interceptions and all kinds of things like that. Those issues have been in the game the last few years or more. So it's more of a case of the compounded frustration. We've talked about that in previous shows, how even they're not new issues, but that is kind of the problem. The frustration is just compounded over years of having to deal with these issues. It didn't feel good. Offline, I've had more joy with that situation, but even then, it felt like I was missing shots I should making a few shots that I shouldn't have, and the CPU was just making a lot of shots with the same, and you can, of course, you can see their shot meter as well, and you can see, because with me playing on with the shot meter on, I could see what the CPU was doing, and it was hitting the same release points I was, not green after green, still just in that good zone, and it's making all kinds of crazy shots and contested shots that I was missing, and it really feels like the game has been tuned for online or even local competitive player, rather, and against the CPU is still making all kinds of tough layups that it shouldn't, especially when you're missing the same layups at the other end. The tuning is still off. It was off last year, especially when it came to missing layups. It's no better this year. Although, again, sometimes, as you noted, it is possible to make some layups that by the meter you definitely shouldn't. It just doesn't feel consistent, and it's very frustrating to feel that your success isn't really coming from your input so much as pure dumb luck, and that you're kind of being punished for actually playing the game reasonably well. It doesn't feel like you're adequately rewarded for that.
Yeah, I don't. The next time I might scream the next time I hear somebody or see somebody say "Sim Nation" or "Get Good" or "This is a simulation basketball game." Don't play that attitude, and don't be an elitist, and don't act like that when your players move that way. When player movement has this many issues, when there's so many random issues that happen with the game, and there's so much stuff that in the game that has nothing to do with skill. And by the way, you can see this over the last few years with the 2K League. When you actually watch those games, it's basically, I hate to use the word cheese, but it's basically a cheese fest. Remember I said that what you're doing is you're just trying to find exploits within the game. Like basically what's doing is they're not really competing against each other. They're basically competing against the game. And they're trying to dodge the minefield of issues and exploit things like blow-bys and stuff like that. And this is another point I really want to make, and this is frustrating because I saw this comment today on Twitter. Somebody made a comment that said, I can't believe all the, complaining. They use the B word. All the complaining. Look at the game that we have. Look at the. I didn't see you guys complaining about the games that we used to have, and I think they ended it with like a chill out. Like that was like their complaint. And I want to point something out. Games like NBA Live 2004, NBA 2K6, some of the games, even the games like NBA Live 98, all had less frustration. They had more sound, fun gameplay in a lot of ways than even this title. Not everything new is not better. Just because there's pretty graphics, just because the game looks better, just because it has more depth, doesn't mean that the between the lines gameplay, and just because there's more to it, like just because you have things like size ups in the games now, just because there's more to it does not mean that it's a better gameplay experience, that it's more fun, etc. I don't care if those games graphics back then were inferior. When it comes to the game's mechanics, you knew what you were getting into. You knew the movement was understandable and made sense. When you went up for a shot, you didn't have this frustration and stress when you were going up for a shot. When you were going around the hoop and stuff, you knew what to expect. You weren't being sucked into players all the time, etc. So, you know what? To that person that said that, you're wrong. There are more fun games that were made, decades ago that have less frustration and less issues than 2K21.
Their technology, their mechanics are more primitive, obviously, because we've come a long way since then, but as relative to what was possible at the time, they are more fun. I absolutely agree, and we've made that point several times that it's true of many things with basketball, both real and virtual, that the new is not always better, that things can go in a bad direction with mechanics and whatnot, and that's certainly, I do think, is the case here. A lot of the issues that I have with 2K21 actually remind me a lot of my issues with NBA Live 19, especially after the patches. Just things about the way the players move, some of the heaviness and the clunkiness there. Also, the shooting, how the meter is not working as well as it could be, and how the CPU is able to make shots so much easier. It doesn't feel properly tuned in that respect. And even things like the dribbling controls, like some of the dribbling controls in Live 19 where more advanced moves are done with, more basic moves rather, are done with more advanced movement on the sticks, whereas before it was just very simple. The most simple movement for a left to right crossover in 2K20 was, if you are using absolute controls as I do, left or right on the right stick, which makes sense. Or if you're using camera relative as you prefer, then towards the left or right hand. Now, as I mentioned on the last week's show, it's up and left and up and right and down and left and down right for behind the back dribbles. So they've changed that. And yes, learning curve, trying new things, whatever. But I don't think that's the best approach, to have basic moves, have more advanced, precise movements. They should be the most basic stick movements for stick-based dribbling controls. So that's something that I don't like. It's an issue with Live in recent years, especially Live 19. So a lot of the things I had problems with in Live 19 have become problems, ironically, in 2K21. And I won't say that I've hated every minute of playing 2K21, because I can feel the things that work. And when something does come together and it works, it's nice and it does feel good. But there's too much inconsistency with that. Is the underlying point that I have, the underlying criticism I have with the game. And I felt some of it in the demo, but it doesn't feel quite right in the full version either. We don't have a day one patch yet, which, as much as people say we have too many day one patches and whatnot in general, there were things that were promised in the day one patch, like a bigger shot meter. People are having issues with that. There's a tweet I'm just reading now, actually, from Beluba, that says, try zooming your camera in if you're having trouble with the shot meter. That is a makeshift solution.
That's not a solution.
No,
because there's a lot of problems that can happen with that. Because what ends up happening is you can see less of the floor.
Yeah.
Number one. So there you limit yourself in that way. That is not a solution.
And these,
the other thing.
Yeah. These are my problems with solutions. Quotation marks solutions with air quotes with that. Is we see that a lot. We see those excuses made a lot. Like if people have problems with issues with my career, just play My League with player lock. You can do that, but then you miss out on a lot of things that are part of the My Career experience. It's not a valid comeback, or it doesn't shoot down. It doesn't. I'm trying to think of the word I want to say. It doesn't discredit that feedback, those criticisms. It doesn't discredit them. It's a possible solution that you can do. It's not particularly ideal, and we have to stop advocating for these less than ideal solutions. I mean, we can certainly put them out there as a thing to try, but I do think that the meter needs to be a little bit bigger for those who use it, a little bit more, a little easier to see. This was something that was promised, obviously. You can go back and there's a tweet from Beluba saying that was going to be a thing, that they were going to make the meter bigger. Presumably that's going to be in the first patch that hasn't come through yet, or at least certainly hasn't on PC. And judging by the complaints of people on console, it hasn't come through on console either. That was a thing that was promised, and maybe they're getting around to it because they did mention it. But yeah, makeshift solutions, maybe they're okay, but we have to stop giving credit to or using them as a defense. Imperfect solutions, because problems need good solutions, not imperfect ones. And look, perfection is a impossible goal, I realize, but very flawed solutions that are far from ideal and don't really address the problem and don't dismiss or discredit the underlying criticism. We need to stop defending 2K blindly with these thought-terminating cliches almost that just shut down this criticism, valid criticism, and just let's, it's okay to say, look, I like the idea, but I want it to be better, or I like the game in general, but this could be better. It is okay to constructively criticize and suggest alternatives. Maybe they'll do it, maybe other people will disagree, but we should at least all give each other room to express that criticism, especially when it's couched constructively, and that there is actually logic to it. It's not just, this game is trash, it sucks, insulting the developers or threatening them or something stupid, which is dumb. Don't do that. But certainly give constructive feedback, and don't shut it down when somebody else does.
It's basketball. They're overcomplicating it. They're overcomplicating the player movement. They're overcomplicating the shooting. They're overcomplicating the layups. They're overcomplicating the dribbling. All of that stuff. It's basketball. It's not that complicated. And what they've done, and I'm looking at these tweets from Dazar and Mike Wong and whatnot, and I'm looking at it, and they're saying, be patient. And they're trying to give, these tips. And even the tips are absolutely ridiculous. I'm sorry, they are. To say, if you remember his tweet, Mike Wong's tweet about the layups, and he did this like paragraph on, well, if you turn the stick counterclockwise this way, and you do this and you do that, and then you turn the right stick a certain way, and all of this stuff, and it's like it's a layup. It's a
Yeah.
layup. Like,
Yeah.
Stop overcomplicating.
It's not a cheat
when
code.
I say things,
It's not.
right. When it's not a cheat code, it's a damn layup. And if I go back and we talk, you go back and play a game like NBA 2K11. 2K11 is a decade older than this game, right? NBA 2K11 has better gameplay than NBA 2K21. Right, the gameplay, the movement is more sound. You found yourself enjoying NBA 2K11. The shooting makes a lot more sense. Going to the rim makes a lot more sense. Of course, it's not perfect. Of course, it has its bugs.
It's
not
aged a
perfect
little bit, of course.
And
Yeah.
The player movement department either. But the game is more fun and it makes more sense in a basketball way.
And I mean, this was the whole thing that they were talking about, balancing between fun and sim. That and
they didn't do that.
No.
By the way, imagine trying to say, exactly. Imagine saying in the off season, we're trying to, in the develop. It's another case of falsehoods in the developer blog. We're gonna we're gonna make the game more fun, and then coming out with this and just telling people to be patient when they're screaming from the rooftops that it's not fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they went backwards even.
It's
in that direction.
condescending, and people buy into it and defend them with this. And look, I don't condone being nasty towards developers or anyone online for that matter. But at the same time, it's okay to say, look, no, this is not a case of get good. This is a case of there is a problem here. There's an underlying problem. We don't think that you're succeeding in your goal as your consumer. And some of these posts, and we've talked about this before, these tweets and whatnot, are outright disdainful towards the user base. And again, it
bothers me. Like the Czar's pin tweet. Did you see his pin tweet?
Yeah, that's the one we discussed before. Yeah, and it's very disdainful towards the user base, which I don't think is right. I think I've talked about 2K's problems with communication before. They've been on top for so long, and they've had a lot of love over the years as 2K's gone from strength to strength, and Live has floundered. Now they're finding themselves, they're getting criticism because there are some long-standing issues, and now that they are the only game in town, people are kind of, it's hard to say. And people still say like, oh, what are you going to do? Play Live? But at this point, Live is, and maybe won't be in the future. We certainly hope not. But for the moment, at least, it is a non-factor. So it's not a case of you can't. The 2K can no longer point and say, well, what are you going to do? Play that other game? Look at that other game? It's like, well, no, you are it. You are it, and we have high expectations of you because you have done such a great job with past games. You are going to be held to a high standard. It is not hating. There is hate out there, of course, but it is not hating to point out flaws and make suggestions and also say, look, this isn't really lining up with what you were promised. What we were promised, what you promised us is not really what you're delivering, which is what a lot of people are saying. And when you've got your cover player, who is actually a professional, obviously a professional basketball player, an NBA player. It is not somebody who is clueless about basketball. It's when they're criticizing the mechanics, and of course Damian Lillard is an experienced gamer himself. It's not like he is somebody who didn't grow up playing games and is unfamiliar with them. So as both a pro basketball player and an aficionado of basketball video games, Lillard has many of the same complaints that it seems a lot of us have as well. So it's wrong to be so dismissive. And again, and to put it all put it all under hating, or say that everybody who's doing it is just whining or complaining or hating or bashing. Look, there are people who are doing that, and to those people who are doing that, you are not helping. Please stop being jerks about this. But but a lot of us are pointing it out in very reasonable ways and logical ways, and demonstrating the problems, like the video that you posted of our game. So to shut down that criticism is. Whether it's the developers or people doing it, it's more than that. There are other people who are complaining simply because it's new or there's a learning curve. But beyond the learning curve, as again, there are underlying issues with the mechanics that have nothing. We can practice as much as we want, but there are still those underlying issues that need to be addressed.
There was a video that somebody posted on day one. And there was and I think you may have seen me post this, and I posted this on Twitter, there was about 13 or 14 missed layups in a row. And this, it was just like, and I compared it to Charles Smith, who, got, and what people, there's a big difference between that because Charles Smith went up once, contested by Horace Grant. Second time he was stripped by Jordan. And then the two were blocked from behind. So these weren't just missed layups by Charles Smith in that game. But the point that I want to try to make is if you look at the comments under the guy that posted the video of missing 13 or 14 layups in a row or whatever it was, they're sticking up for the game. They're saying, oh, he's, look at this guy. He's like a 60 to 65 overall, thinking that, he can just go out there and make layups. Yes. These are, these are layups right at the hoop.
Yeah.
These are layups,
well
these are
timed.
Look at this video, well-timed layups where he is literally right at the rim, right with his hand right next to the rim. Nobody truly contesting the shot, and he just keeps missing over and over and over again. I don't care if you're 20 overall. I don't think you can go that low. I don't care if you were, the lowest overall that you can possibly be in the game. If you're right at the hoop and your hand is right next to the hoop and you time it perfectly, that should go in. And to watch the people that were like getting on this guy who showed all of these missed layups in a row, and because he had a problem with it. He also, on this video, he's being sucked into other defenders constantly.
Yeah, you can see the problem.
Like, he's just trying to go up. You can see the problems on this video. And the fact that, and you can see the meter, too. You can see that he's releasing it correctly. And it's just missing over and over and over again. Again, I don't want to hear the Sim Nation elitist stuff. And like you said, with Damian Lillard, he came out and said that. We pointed out 3 or 4 different players who said it for 2K20. About the issues with the game. That is just not a good look for NBA 2K.
It's not. And look, these issues have been brought up last year. Things like the Intimidator badge making it too easy to cause players to miss. And having played as a big online in 2K20 the last few months, I found out just how easy it is to, without really challenging a shot, to actually force a miss. You can even do it with a gold Intimidator badge, or certainly with a Hall of Fame, but all you need is even just a silver will do it, but a gold will really be effective in it. Is that even if somebody goes up and they get fouled, if say a teammate fouls them and they're going up to try for an and one, if you just rush in at the last minute and put your hands up, it will force a miss, and it will most of the time. So you can very cheesily cause these misses. And of course, these badges are not just my player, they're not just my career based, they're also utilized by real NBA players as well. So it's one of those things where you have to go through the rosters and rebalance all the badges just to try and balance the game because of the default ratings aren't right. That shouldn't be a thing, and certainly it's a thing that you can't do in certain modes anyway, so it's beside the point. You look at that video that you talked about, and yes, he's missing a lot of good releases, not green releases, but certainly good releases. And this ties back into what I said, is that I've noticed that going against the CPU, I will miss shots like that are pretty decent looks by players who can finish around the rim with contact and whatnot. Playing with the 90s All-Stars and playing with the likes of Jordan and Hakeem and Shaq and everything, and having going up against the 2000s All-Stars, having Shaq being unable to outmuscle Dwayne Wade in the paint, things like that. And play movement. But with the layups, missing good releases, while at the other end the CPU is having the same releases, because you can see their shot meter as well, because now the CPU uses release timing rather than real shot percentage. That went into effect last year and it's still the same this year as well. You can see that they're making the same shots that I'm missing more consistently. So it is that discrepancy, that inconsistency between the mechanics and everything that is frustrating, because you're feeling like, oh, I'm doing everything right. I'm doing exactly what the CPU is doing. And yes, there are other factors like badges and ratings and whatnot, but it still feels like it's just coming down to being screwed over by the CPU, being screwed over by certain mechanics and unbalanced badges and things like that. So there is an issue with all of that. And
the balance isn't there.
No, it's unbalanced.
Just playing a CPU or a human. I want to make another point about the missed layups too. And this is mechanically not like real basketball. Again, I'm going to say this over and over again on this podcast. I don't want to hear the elitist Sim Nation stuff in this game. I don't want to hear it.
No.
You'll go to the hoop. You'll go to the hoop, and you will try to go up strong for a layup, and your guy just randomly slows down. You can't control it. Your guy just randomly slows down, and your animation going up towards the hoop is slow and not strong, completely unrealistic, nothing like real life. And by the time you actually go up, you're going to get a canned block, so somebody from the weak side is going to block you, or there's going to be a heavy contest, and you're going to brick the layup.
Yeah.
And it is the exact opposite of real hoop. When you and I were playing in that game, you couldn't do anything with Derrick Rose.
No.
You look like an absolute
who is an explosive. He's explosive.
Yeah. This is one of the most explosive point guards in NBA history. You couldn't move laterally the way you wanted to. You couldn't change directions the way you wanted to. You didn't get one first step on me with Derrick Rose in the entire game, and you were trying. You were trying to do something with it, and you couldn't. Yeah. And you would try to, and you and I have been basketball gamers. I mentioned this a long time. We've been basketball gamers for a long time, and we have a proven track record of knowing how to play these games. We know hoop. And I'm watching you with Derrick Rose, and he has no explosiveness. His clunky change of direction, his head is bobbing while he's dribbling. The ball is warping hands while you're dribbling, etc. You had mentioned your issues with the dribbling system in the field as well. And you're just like, I'll say this again, this is hopefully maybe the last time, that I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear the realism aspect. I don't want to hear the sim nation stuff. I don't want to hear the elitist stuff. I don't want to hear the excuses. I can point to a million different reasons why this is not a good feeling basketball game, and I don't want to hear it.
When it's difficult to take Bob Cousy off the dribble with Derrick Rose, that's a problem.
I walked you down, and I didn't even have to do anything.
Yeah. Bob Cousy is a great player and probably overlooked, as many players from the early days are these days. I mean, we overlook players from the 80s and 90s are underrated these days, frankly, so definitely players from earlier eras are as well, pre-three-point shooting era. But, yeah, he should not have been locking down an explosive athlete like the Derrick Rose on the all-time Bulls, who is supposed to be pre-injury ACL. In fact, if you could somehow take Derrick Rose now and put him up against Bob Cousy in his prime, I still don't think Bob Cousy is shutting him down the way you were shutting me down, quite frankly. So that's an issue. And you see it with the CPU, you see plotting centers keeping pace with your players. You see the CPU are able to slip around you and past you and rocket layup past you and rocket dunk past you while they're sucking you in at the other end. It feels like the CPU is playing by a different set of laws of physics even, and of course they get more body steals and everything. All these legacy issues that are still there. People tell me how it's better than 2K20 and more polished. I'm not seeing the polish. I don't think it's...
Oh, it feels worse. It feels worse.
Yeah. I talked about sticking with 2K20. I may indeed go back to 2K20. I like things they've done with my team, and we'll get to modes in a moment, because there is some good stuff there that they've done. But I do think... they need to be careful with modding and tuning, modifying and modding. That's what we do. With modifying the game, the mechanics or tuning it. I'm okay with the concepts that they have in place for shooting, because if nothing else, you can use the shoot button and timing. That's the same as what we've been doing so far. It is the tuning of what happens with the good release window and being outside the good release window. If they can tune things with the player speed, because the CPU players still feel like they're a couple of steps quicker than the user control players, and there's still that running in mud feeling while they're breezing. There's less skating, I feel, but so it looks better, kind of sometimes, but there's still that movement that it feels like your player's very heavy and running in mud, and the CPU players are just breezing around much easier. There's still that legacy issue there. I'm not feeling the improvement. I don't think it's going to improve until next gen. I'm not 100% convinced it will be better on next gen, because it's still going to be them designing this from the ground up. And if they design it the same way, it's just going to have the same legacy issues. We talked about that before with legacy issues crossing multiple generations and motion systems and whatnot. This is not the first time they've introduced new technology, and yet the same issues persist. So I do have my concerns, and yeah, 2K20, I've had some fun moments with it so far, and of course I'm going to give it more of a go, and look, we reserve the right to change our minds as we get used to the game, and maybe we can compensate for it, or maybe patches will come through, and to get back to the point that I kind of got off there, it is important that 2K listens to the right feedback and not make knee-jerk reactions and not buff shooting too much, because it shouldn't be buffed, it should just be working more consistently. But to that point, it is important that they do fix that up, and so that it feels better, that it feels more consistent. Not that it's easier. Don't make it easier. Make it more logical. Make it more consistent.
Exactly. And, there was a point, because I wanted to bring up the differentiation thing, and the two-man Ken animations again. There was a point, and this is on the highlight reel, where I'm on the fast break with Bill Russell. And for anybody who knows Bill Russell, by the way, and knows of the way he played, he was an Olympic athlete. Like, he was an Olympic-level athlete. Bill Russell was incredibly fast in the open floor. There's video out there of Bill Russell jumping over somebody to score a layup on the fast break. He was incredibly athletic. And I'm way ahead of you with Bill Russell on the fast break, and I'm way ahead of Artis Gilmore. You're many feet behind me.
Yeah.
And probably 10 to 15 feet behind me. And randomly, I go to a crawl. Not overuse in turbo, not like the icon underneath flashing or anything like that. My speed is breaking. I can't get to the rim, and you somehow make up all of that ground with Artis Gilmore and block me.
Yeah.
And
it's a catch-up problem. And we've seen it before.
It's like, and that movement that I'm talking about dramatically impacts the way you play in the half court.
And you got me with MJ once. You were able to strip MJ when I was out in the break as well, with a similar issue that you were able to catch up. Yeah.
And I never should have been able to catch up.
Yeah.
I never should have been able to catch up with you. And if I remember correctly, I think I caught up with you with John Havlicek.
Yeah.
I think
who was a fine, great motor, great athlete.
And he was a athlete.
Right. Yeah. But he wasn't Michael Jordan, no.
Right.
By all
way
accounts.
ahead of that version of Michael Jordan. But again, the mechanics have to be sound. They have to be right. It doesn't feel like real basketball. There's more frustration than enjoyment. And I've talked about this so many times before. It's about creating memories with these games. It's about having fun. And it's also about them finding the right balance between fun and realism, and being able to appease and give a game to all different types of players.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, it needs to feel right on the sticks. And, Andrew and I, that was our first game ever. That was the first game we've ever played against each other online. And I was really glad that you asked me to play. And I enjoyed the fact that you and I played. Like, I enjoyed playing it with you, but the experience was frustrating.
Yeah, and look, I feel that with the mechanics, if they are tuned a little bit, again, not easier, just more logical, just a bit more consistent, I think they can work. I think the game, for all its flaws, can be a bit more fun than it is now. So it'll remain to be seen what happens after patches, but I think it's safe to say that our initial impressions are, at the very least, a bit disappointed, if nothing else. We were expecting a bit more polish than we've got. The demo, I think, perhaps pointed towards less canimations, which is not the case. So we'll see how it goes, and again, hopefully the patches don't take it in an even worse direction, and they don't listen to people who just want it to be easier. Because I do agree that just don't make it easy, because the percentages were fine. It was how they came about that felt a bit artificial. And artificial difficulty is not good difficulty. We want a proper challenge and consistency and right results for the input and everything.
Sense of control.
Yeah,
control your destiny. A sense of control, and there's nothing more important than control. And I want to bring up, you brought up a point. I want to circle back to this really quick. You had brought up NBA Live 19. Even post patches where they made the game feel clunky and heavy and they hurt the shooting and everything, the animations still made more sense. They looked more fluid. You know what I mean? Like changing direction and switching hands with the dribble, or even just like a drive to the hoop. Did they have speed and acceleration break issues and like just speed issues in general? Yes, they did.
Of course, yeah.
Was
very
there
much
issues with animations randomly slowing down at the hoop and just random outcomes at the hoop? Absolutely, 100%. But NBA Live overall, NBA Live 19 had cleaner animations. And what they were missing was that fluid, fun, consistent feel, like that fun, put your hands on the stick. I'm looking forward to this. They didn't have enough signature play either in NBA Live 19. It just felt like all the players blended together. You could use De'Aaron Fox and he'd feel like Patrick Beverly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there was no real difference. So I honestly have more hope for NBA. This is unbelievable that I'm saying this. I have more hope for NBA Live 22 to come out with something that I'm going to enjoy more than I do with NBA 2K21's future right now.
Yeah.
And part of that is because of the Scott O'Gallagher, Rob Jones stuff that we're going to be talking about and that I talked about on Virtual Hoop Dreams, but also the fact that even before that, NBA Live 19 was moving in a direction that I could see a positive future in.
And I should say that I would personally call 2K21 a better all-around product than Live 19. I'm not suggesting that Live 19 is the better game top to bottom, because I do not believe that it is. But I am noticing familiar issues, and the same kind of issues I have with shooting and dribbling in Live 19. As I said, I can see it in 2K21. So I think that it's it does make me a bit worried for next gen, obviously, because they're going to have similar mechanics, I would have to imagine. We will come back to the gameplay impressions. I mean, look, by all means, feel free to disagree with us. We can certainly have a civil discussion about our difference of opinion with this, and let us know how you feel about the gameplay at this stage. We will see how it goes with patches, and of course, continue to cover that in the weeks and months to come with NBA 2K21. Before we get to the OG and Rob Jones news, I did want to touch on modes very quickly. My team is pretty solid this year. It's I like the ideas that they're doing with seasons and everything. So I like the way, again, it does come down to gameplay and enjoying the gameplay experience, but I do like what they've done with the modes. My league has got a very cool addition in the form of sharing scenarios, so that you can basically set up a My League save and make some trades and everything, and then share that with somebody else to do. Of course, back in the day when we could share saves very easily externally and share them the old-fashioned way, the saves, that was quite possible to do. We could set up scenarios for each other, but now there's an in-game sharing facility to do that. It's a small feature, Derek. It's one that they didn't promote because they didn't do a My GM or My League blog this year for current gen anyway. But I'm glad to see it. I think little touches like that are very cool to see. TG So Good, the goods on YouTube, of course, pointed this out, and it is a very cool feature for My League. My League is not in the best shape right now, owing to the pandemic and the fact that the game launched with 2020 season rosters. But that being said, it's cool to see something like that at least added to My League. My career, I haven't played much of it yet. As I said, I'm trying to move away from that this year. But just like last year, it's very easy to skip the prelude. Once you get the introductory scenes, you can skip straight to the neighborhood and skip the story. And then the new neighborhood is not too bad. It's nice. It's new and fresh, and they've actually cut out a lot of cutscenes, Derek, where before you would have to always walk into the shop and they would show you walking in and talking to the shop assistant before you actually, or the clerk, if you will, before being able to buy something. They've trimmed down a lot of stuff like that and really made a lot of less messing around with unnecessary cutscenes that on the surface add flavor, but then they just become frustrating and time wasters. So they've done little things like that, which are nice. I haven't really got into the story yet. I will play through it at least once to at least comment on it and rank it in an article. But the modes are, again, pretty deep, pretty solid. I'm sure they'll have their issues that will present themselves the more I play them here and there. But I do like the idea of the modes, so if they can tune the gameplay a little bit better, I can see myself playing 2K21 current gen for at least a few months.
Yeah, at least it will hold you over, right?
Well, that's the thing.
I think I wanted to point out, kind of a thank you to him. I don't really use a lot of the tutorials that he does, and it's not because they're not great tutorials. It's just because some of the stuff he does with like draft classes and all that stuff. It's not something that interests me. But is there anybody who jumps on a new game and new ideas and all that stuff video wise than TG So Good?
Not at all.
I mean, he does such
one of our best, one of our absolute best. And shout out to you, TG, because
Yeah, he does such a good job, and he, gives people a lot of great content, and he does tutorials, which I'm a huge fan of. The fact that he actually, breaks things down and tells people how to do things because he wants everybody to, be on an equal level playing field and be able to, use the tools and use the features and stuff like that, try to get the best out of the game. So I just wanted to say, regardless if I use the videos or not, I see it. Like I see what you're doing, and I appreciate that. And it would be great if we even had more TG So Goods in the community who,
absolutely,
who would be, adding tutorials to the tutorial section and, helping everybody out. So, again, so thank you for that.
Absolutely. Once again, shout out, because it's, fantastic contributions over the years, without a doubt. But it is nice to see some of the work that's gone into those modes, a little bit of polish there. So it's, the thing is, I kind of set the bar not too high with 2K21 after both the demo and considering that it is at the end of the generation. I wasn't expecting a huge leap. I was expecting a little bit more polish though than what we got, a little bit more balance and tuning. maybe cleaning up some of the legacy issues. And I've seen this before as well. You're talking about people defending it and they're saying, "Oh, it's current gen. What did you expect? Stop whining. Stop crying. Stop complaining." Yes, it's current gen, but there are some legacy issues that have been there for years. It's not unreasonable to say, well, I'm a bit disappointed that a few of these things, after all these years, haven't been cleaned up, or that this is still an issue, that they haven't changed this, that it feels like they could have done a little bit more in certain areas. And again, these are valid criticisms being shot down by the usual thought-turning cliches. Stop whining, stop crying, like, as you said, stop bitching. We see it in all kinds of forms, and it's counterproductive, and we shouldn't do it to each other. We could feel free to disagree and say, well, that's not my experience. I'm not saying do not have the discussion, do not counter with your own opinions, your own impressions, but the shutting down of the opinions is, and again, that may sound hypocritical after what we've said, but my point is, if people are enjoying the shooting and feel that it's working out for them fine, then I will listen to that point of view. That may be true. I'm not doubting them. My only issue is them saying that there can be no possibility of any problems when there are some that even if they don't ruin the game for everybody, they are quite obviously present, and that's my issue.
I need to make a point though. There are certain things that can't be argued. I'm sorry, there are certain things that can't be argued. If I show you, and you saw this with 2K18 too, if I show you shots over and over again being made outside of the window and then shots being missed right in the middle of the window, and it's a consistent thing, you can't argue that with me. You can't tell me that mechanic
it's evidence,
is working, right? You can't. That's literally evidence. If I show you, and I did this a little bit on the demo impressions bit, if I show you instances over and over and over again of me trying to accelerate with full turbo and my speed breaking and then starting and then breaking and then starting and all of that stuff, and then a defender getting back in and me getting stopped constantly in the hoop because my speed broke and I don't have real momentum, you can't argue that with me. That is a problem with the mechanic. Right, exactly. So I don't agree with the, hey, you know what, this work, I understand the whole thing, if this works for you, that's great. And maybe it's not bugging you as much, but it is a legit problem with the game. It is not realistic. It doesn't look like real human movement, etc. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. It gets really frustrating when I see people when people try to shut down criticism, especially with a lot of when some of the people are displaying evidence and making good talking points to critique. Right.
Yeah.
So, like my post with the screenshot of our stats on our all-time game was I in any way mean? Was I in any way terrible to 2K by that? Did I tag all the developers and go, hey, what the F? You know what I mean? Like, exactly. What the heck are you guys doing? Like, did I do that? No. What I did was I said, hey, listen, there's issues with the shooting. It doesn't flow well. The meter doesn't make sense. There's, shots being made outside of the window. There's some that miss that are in the window, et cetera. And I explained myself. And there is a proper way to give feedback. I agree with that. But to, shut down all criticism, et cetera, and the developers to shut down criticism the way that they do is it's really off-putting.
It's the thought-terminating cliches, which is a very internet thing. That it is the soundbite era, it is the hot take era of the 280 characters on Twitter, the one-liner put down that effectively makes an ad hominem argument and puts it on the person rather than the point and everything. That is a very internet thing. It is not just basketball gaming, but it is something that I think. I do have that in my pin tweet actually currently as I'm recording this. It has been my pin tweet for a while. Things that do not prove your point. Ad hominems are one of them. So, yeah, that's probably our initial impressions of the game, of NBA 2K21. We do reserve the right to change our opinions pending further time with the game, pending patches to come through, as I'm sure there will be. I do hope that the patches are for the better. I hope that it's not... Again, it would be wrong to say make it easier. It's about making it more consistent. One issue that's come up on social media and in our forum, Derek, is the idea of, well, do you recommend this game as it is now? So as we wrap up our initial impressions, you when you put out your 2K21 demo impressions on your YouTube channel and you were talking about it, you talked about who you would recommend the game to and whether people would skip the year if they felt a certain way and things. So circling back to that opinion, that recommendation that you put out there, having played the full version, what is your recommendation? Has that changed at all as far as what you would advise people, or is it pretty much the same?
I don't recommend the game for those who have 2K20 on PC and have all of the mods and have an adequate up-to-date experience. If you're in a money situation, and it's a big part of it, let's be honest.
Oh yeah.
If you're in a money situation where, money is tight and you already have 2K20 and you have it for the PC, or even if you have it for the console and you don't care about having the rookies when they come in and all of that stuff, or you just want to wait for a sale, etc. That's when I would say, I don't recommend it, especially if you did have issues with the 2K20 gameplay, because everything that I'm feeling right now, outside of slightly better foot planning, I'm feeling, and the dribbling feels worse in a lot of ways, and we've talked about that before. I'd say that you're not going to get much of a different experience than you had with 2K20. If anything, it might be more frustrating, especially with the shooting. So I would say save yourself the frustration. However, I want to point this out, and this is the elephant in the room, and we talk about this, is if you want an up-to-date basketball game, if you want to play online with your friends, I have no choice but to recommend it. Right?
Yeah.
There's the only way for you to play a sim type. I hate using the word sim, but a 5-on-5 basketball title representing the NBA, and being able to, build your character and stuff too, and go out and, play against your friends and stuff like that. I have to recommend the game if your friends have the game and you want to play with them. Like, there's what other option?
Exactly.
That's the thing. So,
2K20 servers are still up, so it's possible that if you and your friends are content to stick with 2K20 or for the moment even 2K19 for at least a few more months, then you can certainly do that. But it's moving forward, 2K21 is going to be the game that gets the new content in My Team. It's going to be the one that gets any patches moving forward. They're not going to do anything more with 2K20 now, so if you're not going to get any more issues, there's a chance that issues will be resolved. A chance that issues will be resolved in 2K21 with patches moving forward. It has just launched. There's going to be tuning fixes. There's going to be things. Whether they do actually address the issues remains to be seen. But there will be updates coming through. 2K20, no more updates. So if you are happy with 2K20 and can feasibly stick with it, I don't think that is the worst decision. In fact, if people are really on the fence and not liking what they hear and see, or didn't like what they felt in the demo, then I would certainly recommend that 2K, if you are enjoying 2K20 or indeed an earlier game, then certainly stick with that for now and see how you feel when 2K21 inevitably goes on sale in the not too distant future. So that is the thing. And like you say, if you are want to play with the biggest user base, most people do move on, so 2K21 is going to be where it's at from that sense. But other than that, I do agree with that advice, in generally speaking.
Yeah, I want to point something out too, and part of the reason why I didn't comment too much on your, what you talked about with My Team editions and My League and all of that stuff and the discoveries and everything is because, honestly, I'm sour with the game right now. I have to be completely honest. You know what I mean? We've talked about the between the lines gameplay and whatnot.
Disappointment will do it. Yeah.
That is, disappointment will do it. And, whether, and I've said this again, I said this before, and I said this on Virtual Hoop Dreams as well, what Live in 22 needs to do when it comes out, because I do think they're going to create an NBA Live 22. All signs point to yes. When that comes out, what they need to do is have the basic depth that should be in a sports game at this point. So basic depth, even if it's like Madden type depth, right? With their dynasty mode and whatnot, some basic customization, hopefully a little bit of tribute to retro, but it's really to come out screaming with great gameplay. You know what I mean?
Absolutely,
like the between the lines gameplay. And that will get far more gamers than an advertisement for depth, right?
Yeah.
It's when they see that gameplay and they're like, wow, this looks good. And then somebody jumps on YouTube and goes, man, this game is great.
This is fun,
and then that video gets 1 million views and then and whatnot. So in order to be the ultimate competitor for 2K and actually, win a lot of that market share, it's going to be about that between the lines gameplay.
And since you've shaken that magic 8 ball and it's come up with that, all signs pointing to yes for the NBA Live 22, let's move on to that topic. Of course, the big news this week that you did cover in Virtual Hoop Dreams. A shout out to you and Swaggy for the shout out to me. Very kind words. I'm very humbled by that. Very flattered. So I appreciate that. But we will see what happens in that regard, I suppose. But in any event, you did talk about the move that OG, Scott Gallagher, and Rob Jones have made to EA Sports. And this is obviously a big deal. They are prominent members of or have been prominent members of the NBA 2K team for some time now. Rob longer than OG. OG did actually get his foot in the door as a developer at EA Sports. He was a developer on NBA Live 14, of course. Before that, he ran OG Sports, covering sports video games. He is a former professional basketball player, of course, and college and pro player, has played around the world, including in the NBL here in Australia. So he's definitely knows his basketball. Brought some great ideas to the table with NBA Live 14. Wasn't really there long enough to have much of an impact. It's. I think that a lot of people have talked who have gone back and forth, and Mike, Beluga has talked about it as well, having a feeling of more freedom at 2K than EA, which is one of the things that makes this move so interesting. That OG went to 2K, obviously feeling fulfilled there and doing some great work with 2K, but he has now come back to EA, and of course Rob Jones has apparently been there for a few months now. Looking at his LinkedIn, this is a story by Operation Sports, of course. And before we get into that, Derek, something I wanted to touch on. I mentioned it in the bulletin. I said that I'm usually leery of covering moves like this. And I'm not trying to rip on anyone for doing it, because it's all content, it's news. I've used when Scott moved from EA to 2K back in the day, I didn't really report on it much. I think we talked about it on the podcast when it was made public knowledge. I didn't really cover it from a news standpoint that much with bulletins on the site and whatnot, because it felt like gossipy. It felt like intruding on personal news, because even though we do know their names, that they are not public figures like an athlete or a celebrity of that nature. Although certainly I think they're trying to make Ronnie 2K somewhat of a pseudo-celebrity. We've talked about that before. But as far as the developers go, it's kind of like, well, that's their livelihood, that's their business. There's a certain amount of personal business there that I didn't want to cover, or felt a bit leery about covering from a personal standpoint. But a few sites picked it up, including OS, of course, and another. Scott himself tweeted out a little teaser that's basically revealed that he's going back to EA. On his Twitter bio, it does now say creative director at EA Sports, so it's more or less officially announced. So it's kind of one of those things that you can say, oh well, they're putting it out there, and it is big news for NBA Live's future. The first and foremost is that NBA Live has a future, and this is perhaps the most optimistic thing we've seen, the most optimistic development we've had for NBA Live in several months. We've talked before about how silent they've been, how the silence is deafening. And of course, none of this is coming from official NBA Live channels, EA Sports channels. But the fact that a couple of well-regarded people from the 2K team who have been very instrumental in its success, from all accounts, have joined EA, and they haven't been confirmed as being part of the team yet. But it seems very strange to be brought in to work on anything else, especially Scott. It just bodes very well that they are investing in the future, that they're trying to get some key people from the 2K team to join the NBA Live team and get NBA Live to where it needs to be, that they're bringing in key personnel, that they're making that investment, that they're not giving up on the game, that it's not dead in the water. It's certainly, at the moment, it's in limbo, but it's not cancelled permanently. It's encouraging, not just from the perspective of bringing in a couple of, by all accounts, very talented people, but the fact that they are bringing in, they're trying to make an effort on the game itself. And like you say, that does bode well for an NBA Live 22 and beyond.
Yeah, the basketball gaming world needed this.
Yes.
Like we needed some good news. I said this on the last podcast, if you remember correctly, far before we knew this announcement. And I said to you asked me, I want to say, do I think that NBA Live is going to get a release on next gen? I think that was what we had talked about. And I told you, I said yes. I said I don't think that they're going to waste this opportunity, that there's still no other competitor in the space, that I think that they are going to release on the PS5 sooner rather than later. So when I heard that announcement, I'm like, oh my God, I was right. But it cemented my belief that they are really going to push forward on this. And as I said on Virtual Hoop Dreams, I think that they've been getting used to this tech. I think they've been working on the PS5 tech, working with it to more understand it. And I think that we're going to end up getting an NBA Live 22. And the reason I brought this up too on my show as well is because, he did put it out there. He did make the tweet, the EA Sports tweet. He announced it publicly that he was coming back, and coming back to EA. So I think that made the most sense. I think it's incredibly exciting. I think that people can say as much as they want. It's, NBA Live is dead, and nobody wants to play that, and nobody will buy NBA Live, and all of that stuff. That is just not the case.
Well, nobody plays my team, right? Nobody plays my team, according to some people on Twitter.
It's ridiculous. But if you look at all the comments under Scott O'Gallagher and the tweets surrounding that Scott O'Gallagher announcement, there's a lot of excitement, right? There's hundreds and hundreds of comments, sometimes thousands on different threads stating, let's go, let's do this, and all of that stuff. The bottom line is that there is 2K fatigue. And regardless if there was 2K fatigue or not, what people want are great basketball games. They just want basketball games in the space. They want to be able to put their hands on something different at times. They want to be able to, have a different type of gaming experience, and they just love basketball. And it's as global as it's ever been. And I think that it's absolutely criminal that we only have one sim basketball game being made. And it's absolutely awesome that it looks like they might be getting back into the space.
Absolutely, and it's what we want. We've talked about it so many times before, and I've written articles about it. I've talked about it with you, with Ben, with Kenny on previous shows. The importance of having that competition in the space to keep 2K honest, to give people options, and so that they can both keep each other honest and they can both push each other to greater heights, and not just rest on the laurels and be pushy with recurrent revenue, all kinds of things. EA has that great opportunity to, and it's kind of going against a lot of the issues that EA has with, if you look at FIFA and Madden and everything, they are very microtransaction ridden and everything. And if NBA Live ever gets to that point again, that it's going to be a thing. Like it's inevitable, unless the whole bubble bursts on microtransactions, as someone like Jim Sterling has alluded to, the possibility of that happening at some point in the future. Certainly, if legislation comes in that makes it difficult in key areas such as North America, if they can't, where the game sells the most copies, if they can't put microtransactions in, then that's probably going to be the end of it. But that's a whole thing. That remains to be seen what happens from a legislation standpoint there. But I mean, that would happen with NBA Live if it gets to a certain level of success. But the important thing is that, like 2K has done in the past years, having that solid experience. That and people quite rightfully say, you don't have to pay for, you don't have to engage in recurrent revenue. And I do have my quibbles with that blanket statement because they're obviously trying to push people in that direction. But it is true that you can play My League or other modes, or you can just choose to grind and not pay anything. And if you do, there are experiences there that you can enjoy. So NBA Live does need to get that. And to your point, and as we've talked about it before, it needs to be that well-rounded product that comes out with great gameplay, has at least the basic necessities as far as modes are concerned, that at least hits the things that people expect to see. Maybe they're not completely as deep as they need to be. There are some issues, there are some things they can build towards, but they're at least as deep as they were a couple of generations ago. We've talked about that many times, have we not? The modes, forget about NBA Live catching up to NBA 2K as far as the depth of My League or My GM with its Dynasty of / franchise. It needs to catch up with NBA Live on, like, NBA Live 06 PC. It needs to catch up with the depth of that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is it continued to take features and things that people loved out of the game and ended up having less and less depth every single year. NBA Live 10 was a solid release. I'd say NBA Live 10 was a solid release.
Yep.
But it wasn't deep. It didn't even have the depth of NBA Live 06. You know what I mean? It didn't have the all-time teams. It didn't have the legends, basically, in offline mode and whatnot. It didn't have a deep franchise experience or anything like that. I think one of the things that I'm excited about is, and this speaks volumes, I think, is Scott O'Gallagher has a playing career as well. He had a storied playing career, and I didn't realize that up until recently. He got a Hall of Honor at Warner Pacific, I believe. So basically like the Hall of Fame for basketball for the college that he played for. A storied career overseas, playing basketball as well. I think he retired around 2011 or 2012 and then signed on with EA. Right. So like after his playing career. But I do like, and Rob Jones worked for 2K for 17 years. And before that, he worked 4 years on Madden from 95 to 99, but he was with working on the NBA 2K games for 17 years and most recently as a senior producer. That experience is invaluable, but there's always been these things over the years where people would either make excuses or they would attack EA and say, hey, they don't know basketball. And you've seen this a million times. The developers don't know basketball. The people making the games don't know basketball. What is with this movement? They don't know basketball and whatnot. It gives me some hope that he's the guy that worked on the dribbling system in Live 14, which I think was the best part of Live 14. Scott O'Gallagher did. And I think that it gives me more hope that if he is going to be a creative director for NBA Live 22 or whenever they end up releasing another game, that this is a guy that knows how basketball players move. You know what I mean? He knows... he's a former player. He knows how it should feel, etc. And he's also been an avid basketball gamer. He's only 4 days older than I am. He was born, on November 9th. I was November 13th. We were born the same year. Not to give out too much information. You can remove that if you want. But anyway, the point is that he, is a veteran in the basketball gaming space as well, and he was around for when Live was on top.
Absolutely,
He understands how important it is to have a competitor in that space, and he understands the rich history of NBA Live. And I'm hoping that he comes in super motivated to bring them kind of back to their glory.
And I imagine so. I mean, again, he's left EA once before. A lot of people who've worked for EA and 2K have mentioned how 2K has been a more free environment. Whether that's changed, who knows? But certainly EA is obviously providing this opportunity to rebuild Live. He's been on the podcast before, obviously. If you go back in the archives, naturally we'd love to have him on again if he's ever open to that as we move forward. And the other thing also, just to branch off very quickly from that, is that you pointed out that they're looking for a new community manager for NBA Live or community engagement or something like that with the title, and they're talking about not just engaging with YouTubers but also social media, Reddit, blogs, which would hopefully I don't like to consider ourselves a blog. We're a site, not a blog, and a community. But at the same time, the idea, it looks to be the last few years with Live, we've kind of been shut out with it. It's been focusing on trying to get the 2K YouTubers and things like that. I've kind of alluded to it before. I try not to make it a big deal about it, especially because it sounds like sour grapes on my part, which it kind of is, because we have been pretty supportive of the NBA Live series, as you would imagine, over the years. But it does feel like they're trying to reach out and rebuild that community, which is a great idea. I'm all for it. No hard feelings on my end. If they're quite willing to work with us again, I'm quite willing to send in that feedback naturally. And if they're bringing in these right people, as you say, Scott knows his hoops. He's a former player. Talking to him, either on Twitter or on the podcast, it's very apparent. It's hopefully he's in that position to make these positive changes, and that EA will put the resources and whatnot into NBA Live to allow him to do that, because it does come down to the tech, of course. But it is great that they're bringing in these people, talented people and knowledgeable people have worked on the NBA Live series before. But he is certainly an asset to them, and if he is the creative director of the game, that is a very good sign. Rob, obviously, a lot of success there and experience with 2K and working on the NBA 2K series in particular. It suggests that they're actually putting the time and effort and the resources into the game. They want the right personnel to do it. They are going to make a go of it on the next generation after floundering and not quite getting it. I mean, I thought Sean O'Brien did some great things in his tenure as executive producer there. Then they brought in Sean Grady. Nothing against him, but he's a Madden guy, a career Madden guy. So it's kind of like with NBA Elite 11 when they tried to bring in the hockey controls. It's like, why are you bringing people who aren't basketball minds in? Or not saying that Sean Grady may or may not be knowledgeable at basketball as well. But at the same time, you got to bring in those people that really know the game. That, like, as you say, they know hoop, and they're committed to that. And I think Sean Grady is back on Madden now anyway. So it's kind of like maybe they with Madden being so successful, they thought, oh well, he'll be able to replicate that with NBA Live. But it's apples and oranges as far as the sport is concerned, obviously. And yeah, I don't think it worked out the way they wanted to. But this is very promising news moving forward. And if we get that on the next generation, this last generation was kind of a bust for NBA Live, all things considered. I don't think that's unfair to say, but they're looking like they're making some right moves now, and better late than never.
I think the biggest thing is if you're going to get community managers, you need to be, how do I put this? You can't just go after popularity. I'm just going to say that. You can't just go off of the people that you and I talk about, like high volume YouTube influencers, people that have a lot of subs or followers and everything. It has to be the right person. I don't care who it is as far as by name or anything like that. It needs to be a person that is constantly engaging people, that has a level head, that can handle like we talked about, people lashing out and all that stuff, and know how to respond to that or who not to respond to in that regard as well. But somebody that's going to promote the heck out of the out of the game, take in the right feedback, and recommend the right types of things for the games as well, because those people are going to have a voice.
Yeah.
So I think that it really comes down to that in this age of NBA Live doing an absolutely horrible, let's be honest, a horrible job engaging with people.
Yeah.
Talk about it, a really poor job talking to people on different social media platforms, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, etc. They're just not out there. And it's time to ramp that up and get people out in the community, and the EA Sports main handle to be constantly talking about the game, putting the idea of NBA Live in people's heads, putting it in people's living rooms, etc. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that they get a good community of communicators out there that are going to do things the right way when they come back.
And that's how it used to be. It used to be talking to us, talking to the old NBA Live.org guys and other people around the community that covered basketball and sports games. They would do that, and depending on how, whether they were niche content creators, back in the day we didn't call ourselves content creators, but for lack of an antiquated term, the people who were doing, covering basketball games in some capacity, the same way that we have been doing as a site for the past 24 years. They were reaching out to us, us and others like that. And we have been shouldered out in the last couple of years in favor of trying to cozy up to YouTubers who really don't give a damn about NBA Live, because they are mostly 2K YouTubers. Live has not presented a product that they can build their content around and get the same kind of audience. That is quite obvious, and they don't have that. I mean, some of them may have that affection for the series. I don't want to put a blanket statement out there that say they don't care about Live. Some clearly don't, and yet they've been the ones that EA has been trying to cozy up to and to work with, and they haven't had that enthusiasm for the series. They haven't necessarily had the right ideas for the series moving forward. And we've talked before about how important it is for EA to listen to the right voices, have the right direction. And yes, it may sound a bit egotistical to suggest that we are the voices to listen to. I do think we have a good track record, dare I say a great track record in that respect. So if that's more open, and it's not just us, but it's also people like Gaming Tailgate, shout out to CDJ on that one. The old crew that's been kind of shouldered out in recent years in favor of influencers who may or may not be the right people to talk to. Not saying all of them aren't, but some of them, some of them perhaps not, or not into it at the very least. They may have the knowledge, but they're not into it as into being NBA Live influencers as 2K influencers, because, again, building your content around 2K is where the hits are going to come, the views, etc., and the engagement. So it stands to reason. But but people like us that are covering sports or basketball games as a whole, reaching out to us and having that enthusiasm and those different voices, and as you say, the best voices, and we are committed to being that, and we're not the only ones. There are people at OS, there are people at, I mentioned Gaming Tailgate, CDJ, other content creators that are willing to do that. That is the important, and of course, shout out to Cluminati, Mario on the official boards, all those kinds of people that have been shuffled out of the feedback groups and so forth. Being so careful not to go off on some kind of bitter sour grapes tangent here, Derek.
Well, I'll say this.
But,
no. If you're this is the bottom line. If you're a biased, excuse-making apologist, you're not a good influencer.
For any game,
That's it. That's it for any game. I don't care what it is, and not just gaming, in just in the world. Right?
Indeed, yeah,
as a human
true.
being.
Yeah,
if you're a biased, excuse-making apologist, you're not a good influencer, and unfortunately, that's what makes up the majority of influencers for basketball video games.
It's and it is unfortunate that sometimes the loudest voices are not necessarily the ones with the best points to make, and we're not trying to pick fights here. Look, people, you can make up your own minds about who falls into what category, but that is the way it is. But if they are going to open it up to not just them, but also other people that have been kind of excluded from that space and that discussion, and people who are going to bring this to the table, and because people have been pointing out, I remember, I forget who it was, but saying that they were at some community event and saying to the team at the time, that franchise is not where it needs to be. This, you are going to lose people. This is wrong. You need to do this. And it was just falling on deaf ears. And that comes from leadership. That comes from direction from suits. That comes from, top level producers and whatnot. So again, bringing it back to someone like, having Rob and Scott on there, people who have shown interest in gamer feedback before, and people who have been very dedicated to making the best possible basketball game that could possibly be made with the tech. And again, it comes down to whatever tech and resources that EA as a company are willing to give the NBA Live development team. That's obvious, but it does start with that leadership. It's like an NBA team, is it not? I mean, if you don't have that right leadership and the right coach and the right players who can lead the way as the captains and the star players and whatnot, you're not going to win any championships with directionless leadership. Look at the way the Bulls have tried to rebuild over the past decade or so, or at least the last 5 years post Derrick Rose and whatnot. You can just see how bad leadership, just how it's what's the saying, the fish rots from the head down kind of thing.
Right, we talked about the suits, right?
Oh, yeah,
making it a priority, and the suits doing the right things. And when I think of that in an NBA, from an NBA standpoint, a franchise standpoint, I think of GARPAX, right? So
exactly,
you think about, the people, the people that, make the decisions at the highest levels and whatnot. And EA, basically, they need to make NBA Live a priority. There's no reason for them not to. Basketball globally is as possible, as exposed and popular as probably it's ever been at this point. And regardless if we like the game or not, that's just the truth. There's more people playing basketball video games than ever before. So there's absolutely no reason for them to put their best, for them not to put their best foot forward and put the time and resources and money, etc., into NBA Live.
And hopefully they do, because the space absolutely needs it. It needs competition. People can say life should just go away, but as we said before, they say that and then they complain about 2K. And I don't like using the words whining and complaining, because especially after I just railed against them earlier in the show. But certainly it is hypocritical, it is short-sighted, myopic to, and there's a tautology for you, short-sighted and myopic. It's not seeing the forest for the trees. I can just keep going all night with this, Derek, with different euphemisms. But it's folly. There's a fourth one, to talk about how live needs to go away, but then say, oh, 2K, it's disappointment and we need something to change things up. Well, the only company that's really in a position to do it with a history, license, and relationship with the NBA, we've talked about this before, of course, but the only company that is in a position to really do anything is EA Sports with NBA Live. Would it be great if we had the multiple titles back in the space and viable options, like 3 or 4 of them or whatever, as it was back in the late 90s through the early 2000s? Sure, that would be cool. That would be a lot of things to cover. It'd probably make for some 4-hour podcasts as we try to cover all the games every year. Although we'd probably mostly focus still on Live and 2K for the most part. But we would still have those options and it would be cool. But that's probably not going to happen. What can happen, and what's looking like it's likely going to happen, is having Live back and hopefully making this strong comeback. I am very encouraged to see them making these moves, even though they're not being talked about by the official channels, because that won't happen until they're ready to start pushing out a new game and announce a new game. Naturally, they want to have some solid news and probably something to show to actually come back. We've talked about it before. they do need to engage more. So that is a thing, whether it's even if it's just keeping the consciousness of NBA Live, people's consciousness rather, that it's putting out things like for the 25th anniversary of NBA Live, or putting out things and putting out something, talking about the game in a way that suggests that it's going to keep coming out and talking about its rich history and getting people feeling positive about the brand. That is important, but at the same time, it is understandable that they're not going into details about these things. But we do know that from these, from Rob's LinkedIn, obviously that's public, from Scott putting out the tweet, that they're getting some big names from the 2K team and adding that. So it is promising that they're going to do this. And if nothing else, it suggests that they haven't given up on NBA Live, which is the most encouraging thing we've heard about NBA Live in at least 2 years, probably, when you think about it. And I want to put this out there because people will always put a negative spin on pretty much anything on the internet. And I saw a comment about it saying, how sad it is, how desperate that Live needs 2K's people to come in and fix it. It was the most, and I sent you that comment, it was the most, I think, short-sighted, myopic, negative, needlessly snarky spin on a situation like, why wouldn't you go out and get the best people? Well, since 2K has been the brand leader, why wouldn't you go out and get people who have been contributed to its success to be part of your team? They need 2K to come in and fix this mess, or they want to get the people that have helped make 2K a success on their team and help make NBA Live a success, just like an NBA team going out and getting his plays like, the Lakers need to get Anthony Davis and LeBron James just to compete. Well, did you want them to compete with a bunch of G League players? Of course you go out and get a couple of superstars. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I thought that was a very needlessly snarky anti-EA. Like, how can you make a good move for EA sound bad? It's one of those things that...
Well, 2K has taken people from... Well, 2K has taken people from EA before.
Exactly. Why wouldn't you poach top talent?
Right. Not only that, ideas have been taken from each other.
Exactly. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you?
Both companies are doing it. Give you a perfect example. 2K for NBA 2K13, they took NBA Live's right stick dribbling.
Exactly.
Right? They did. They took that. But then also for NBA Live 19, the NBA Live crew took the same controls from NBA 2K. So it was double tap Y for alley-oop. Yep. The fancy pass button was the same, all of that stuff. So EA took that from 2K. It's literally the same control scheme. They just use the same thing.
Good idea. So, a good idea.
Right, because it was a good idea. NBA Live first came out with the WNBA teams, and then there goes 2K with WNBA. So the point is that they've both taken talent from each other. They're both in the same exact basketball gaming space. They're both trying to do a lot of the similar things. They're trying to simulate the exact same game between the lines, all of that stuff. And the bottom line is talent is talent. And if you can get somebody to help make your game even better, it doesn't matter where they come from.
And look, I get wanting to dump on EA and NBA Live because they are, frankly, an easy target with the struggles over the years. Whether it's morally superior to do so, that's a whole other kettle of fish. But yeah, it was kind of put a negative spin on a good move for EA, and it was very, and not surprising because again, these are the kinds of things that happen in discussions among gamers and fanatics of any kind, hobbyists of many kinds, of course. But there's no other way, I think, to look at this except that it is a smart move by EA. It's doing it to make NBA Live successful again, to get it to where it needs to be by bringing in people who have that track record, who have made positive contributions to the brand leader, to their competition. Not that there have been much competition to 2K in recent years, but you get the point. If nothing else, taking a couple of big names from the brand leader, it is such an important move. It suggests that the NBA Live series is not dead in the water, that it is something that they're going to try and put resources and time and effort into to try and make it come back on the next generation. It's the most positive news we've had for a while. People will spin it the way they want, of course, but for my money, it's good news for NBA Live, and it's encouraging. It's the most encouraging thing we've heard in a couple of years, and I hope that it does pan out in the long run, because we've said it so many times before, but we need that competition in the basketball gaming space, in the sim games, or whatever you want to call them, the 5v5, the realistic ones, not the arcade-style games. We call them sim games. We need that competition there. We need the alternatives there. EA and NBA Live is the only viable one on the horizon, and it could make a comeback in a big way with the right people calling the shots, and if they're allowed to fulfill their creative direction and given the support and the resources and whatnot to make that vision, come to become a reality, come to fruition, then yeah, they could have a very bright future for NBA Live, and might actually get basketball gaming to a point where it feels like we should be in a golden age right now, and I don't think we are. As much as there are some good things about basketball gaming in the past 10 years, there's also been some major downsides that we've talked about before and we'll no doubt cover again. But this is a great move for EA. Congratulations, obviously, to OG and to Rob for these moves, and I hope it pans out. I hope they are, on a personal note, I hope it proves to be a fulfilling, personally fulfilling for them to take these gigs. Video game development is not the not always the dream job that we think it is, with the long hours and whatnot, and the difficulty and the dealing with people like us on social media. Maybe not people like us, but certainly some people on social media. There are drawbacks and difficulties and challenges in the industry, very harsh industry, as far as creative industries go. So, best of luck to them, and congratulations on the gig, and best of luck moving forward. And yeah, if you need anything from us as far as feedback and whatnot, I think Derek will be more than happy to supply it.
No, absolutely. I also want to point out this is a really exciting time probably for them and their family, but also just personally, professionally. And this is the point. This is their Rocky scenario. This is their being the underdog against Apollo Creed and coming to a decision, and then maybe beating him the next time around. This is that whole, running up the mountain and screaming at the mountaintop type situation. That's the way I look at it. This is it's a daring thing to do, as far as, taking on that big of a responsibility. But if you overcome it, and, you get people creating more memories and having more fun with the games, boy, can you hold your head high. Right. This is that moment. This is the moment that NBA Live and the developers of NBA Live and the people that are going to be involved with this project, this is that moment for them. So I think it's pretty exciting, and it makes me really look forward to the future. All I want, and I said this on Virtual Hoop Dreams, all I want is people to have fun.
Yeah,
like absolutely. All the memories that I created, that I cherish forever with basketball gaming with my two brothers, that's all in just you with your cousin and whatnot, and you personally as well. All the memories that we created with those games, with our families and whatnot, and ourselves, we just want other people to have them.
Absolutely, yeah.
It doesn't matter who makes the game. I don't even care who makes the game. It's just we want a great basketball game and great basketball games in general. So I have my fingers crossed.
So look out for Ubisoft's NBA Action 2022 in Ubisoft. You're up for a Ubisoft basketball game?
Or maybe Xbox will come back, right? Maybe not Xbox, Microsoft.
Inside Drive.
Maybe Microsoft.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we get an Inside Drive.
Sony's NBA featuring the life. Yeah. Who knows?
Where is NBA Shootout 2022 and NBA In the Zone 2022 and NBA Starting 5 2022 and NBA Courtside 2022 when you need it? Where is it?
Where is Bruce Bowen's Combat Basketball? That's what I want to know.
Oh my God! We need to have Marcus Smart's flopping basketball.
Some things can stay in the past. Some things can stay in the past, perhaps. But yes, once again, congratulations to those guys. We look forward to the day when NBA Live does make a comeback, and we of course discuss any further developments as they present themselves. And of course, we will do the same with NBA 2K21 as it continues to move forward and gets updates. Speaking of other games that we've been playing, just to wrap up here with a couple of other games that that we've been playing over the past week or so. You mentioned Dunk Lords last week. I picked it up since. I also picked up the PBA basketball game, the NBA Jam style game, and you did as well. And we'll start with the PBA game because that's a game that we brought up, and it's a game that people have shown interest in because it is again that NBA Jam style. Very much resembles EA's NBA Jam games, in fact. And it's come out on early access, just a pocket change, really. I think it was $3 US for you, about $5.62 or something for me in Australian dollars. So it's a very small investment for early access. But as we found out, it is pretty rough at this stage. Yeah,
the most exciting thing consumers can get, the what they can get most excited about PBA basketball is the fact that it is literally $3 right now in early access. If you want to just throw a few bucks at a new arcade game, and then hope it develops into something that you'll play possibly on a regular basis or have fun with once in a while, that's fine. $3, that's nothing.
Yeah.
So I think that was a good move by the developers to do that. The game is incredibly rough around the edges, and I wrote a long review on it on Steam. And one thing that I really appreciate is the developer response. So in the review that I wrote for it, I talked about how you can't jump pass in an arcade game. You can't jump out of a shot and pass. You can't jump out of a dunk and pass. And as well as I do, jump passing is a huge part of arcade basketball.
Oh, yeah.
It just...
even more so than sim basketball, where obviously normally jump pass is discouraged by most coaches because you have to leave your feet and travel, potentially.
Right.
But arcade is important. No turbo. No turbo is the other important point.
It's just no turbo button. The clunky pace of it. The random slow motion sequences where the ball's going through the air like a beach ball for no reason. I mentioned that. I don't know how much you experienced that in the little time you played. The issues with the clunky dribbling as well, where there is like a spin move and crossover, but they're really robotic and they don't do anything.
Yeah,
it's
they really don't. They don't.
Yeah, exactly. So that being able to smooth those out, etc. And I think that, and I gave some positives as well. The graphics look fine. There's nothing wrong really with the graphics. It has that old style arcade basketball look. It looks like the mobile game that they released. It looks like about how I would expect. The shooting feels pretty good. Overall, it's a little bit too easy, but it still feels pretty good. I like the rim net mechanics. Overall. The passing is sound. The passing is kind of fun. Like, I have no issues really with the passing or anything like that, but it's not and the biggest reason is because it's just not a fun game right now.
No.
The movement is clunky. The movement's clunky.
It is rough. Again, it's the best way of putting it. It definitely takes its cues visually from the EA NBA Jam games, as I said, right down to having the real player faces, the real player photos as the heads that look around. The problem is there's only a couple of them for each player at the moment. Again, it's early access, but at the moment there's a couple of heads. So they're either facing away towards the back, towards the audience on the far side, opposite the hard cam, so that, for lack of a better term, or they're just staring at you, the player, the whole time. Whereas with EA, there were different heads that would change around depending on how it was. At the moment, it's kind of like... It's kind of like Fox Sports NBA Basketball 2000, where they're just constantly kind of looking up at you with a grin on their face all the time. There's only just a couple of expressions. I do like it conceptually, though. It's a good look. It's a good aesthetic. It worked for NBA Jam by EA. It works for this one as well. It just needs to be cleaned up a bit there. It just doesn't feel right. I've yet to finish a game of it. I've quit out after I think about a quarter is about all I could handle, a quarter and a half. And you can feel like it's got the basic idea of that NBA Jam style game, but as you say, it's clunky, it's slow, it's shooting is probably too easy if anything. So you kind of like shooting, but and you're making shots. You can do stuff. So like it's you talk about shooting mechanics. You're feeling
celebration.
Yeah. Oh, the celebrations. Yes. When pretty much a celebration after every basket, which just slows everything down.
6 to 12 seconds.
Yeah.
Literally for the entire time, but between, like, after a made basket, they do their celebration, and then the players have to make their way to the baseline, and sometimes that's a sluggish snail pace, and it's like 6 to 12 seconds of interruption after every single make.
It does. It slows the game down. It slows the game down to the point where it's not the right pace for an arcade game. It needs to be rapid fire, quick, and minimal interruptions and things like that. The original Playgrounds kind of had problems with some of its celebrations and the same thing. It's kind of like a mix of Playgrounds and EA's NBA Jam games, the way they've put it together conceptually. And I think there's potential there for it, which is, again, why if you want to support the developer, as you said in your review, it is worth the loose change to do so. Just be aware of what you're getting into, which is a very rough game. Not being able to block dunks. There are some cool-looking dunks there, I will have to say. The dunk from anywhere power-up that you can build up to after you make the baskets is an interesting idea. It's also very cheap and cheesy, especially without being able to really counteract dunks with being able to block or shove. And that's the other thing, not being able to knock players down is something you really need. That you don't realize how much you miss a mechanic like that in an arcade game until you don't have it, to be able to knock players down or to be able to essentially foul them in some way to make a steal or to stop a basket, because it's it's kind of that no harm no foul kind of approach to basketball. It's how arcade basketball games work. You see how important those mechanics are, and you also see how right NBA Jam got it back in the day, and why I still think to this day every arcade game, and I've said this about Playgrounds as well, that there's a time and place to change things up and do things a little bit differently to NBA Jam, like not just make it an inferior Jam clone, but there's a lot of things about NBA Jam, from the balance of offense and defense, from the power-up system to just the way the game plays, that Midway got it right from the opening tip. They got it right. The Midway games continue to be the superior version of, even though Acclaim got the NBA Jam name, but the Midway games continue to be the superior arcade basketball games through the 90s, as they continue to make things under other titles like Hang Time and Hoops and whatnot. Hoops with a Z or a Z if you like. Though there's a reason the games were designed a certain way, and they got it right. And other games, and Street was able to change it up in good ways as well. But there's a reason that if you design it well and you design it a certain way, there's a time to subvert some of those design ideas or tropes, if you will. And there's other times when they're done a certain way, and there's a reason why they're done that way. And if you do them differently,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was saying if you do them differently, it can work. If it's done well, if that's a logical idea, but different for the sake of different, can be problematic. Like, again, there's a reason that NBA Jam did things a certain way. There's a reason why that formula has worked so well through multiple generations of consoles and whatnot. It's something that I've seen in other games like Playgrounds and now PBA Basketball and so forth. They've tried to do things their own way, which is admirable, and I think you do need to do that to some extent, but you also need to follow the design ideas that made NBA Jam so successful.
Yeah, sorry, I got excited when you compared PBA to NBA Jam, and the reason is because it put this thought in my head. And NBA Jam to PBA Slam is, in my opinion, the equivalent to how it feels to play 2K17 and then 2K21. That's just the way I feel. Like 2K21 is PBA Arcade Slam, and NBA 2K17 is NBA Jam. That's how different it feels. Right? Like that's the comparison I would draw. But you talk about the steal feature as far as being able to push, and I know a game that you weren't as excited about when you put your hands on the sticks as I was, but I think you'll get used to it, and I think the big part is playing single player, and I play too with my brother. But Dunk Lords has the feature of knocking down. It has that arcade feel. Yeah. It has the uppercuts and the pushing, etc. And it doesn't have the same speed issues and whatnot. So I feel 10 times better about putting my hands on the sticks with Dunk Lords than I do PBA.
Yeah, and look, Dunk Lords, since you brought it up, that is a game that you talked about last week and have been really enjoying it. I've been meaning to pick it up, and I did. My initial impressions, although talking about it before we started recording, that your initial impressions were kind of not as positive as you've come to feel about it now. So it's one of those games where I want to give it a bit more of a chance. Maybe it will be different playing it co-op, rather than just against the solo against the CPU. It's very different. I feel it's a bit frenetic. It's kind of it's very wild. There's no stoppages after scoring, and it's, which is an interesting take, and it's very different, and it's very cartoony. It's very power up oriented, which is to the extreme, even more so than Jam. Even more so than NBA Jam Extreme, for that matter. More so than Playgrounds, which has the lottery pick mechanic with its power-ups. It is very much, what gloves and armor you get, and it is very cartoony, which is not a bad thing, but it may not be the game for me. I can see it as a very solid, well-made game, except I do have some problem blocking. It's better to uppercut than block. Basically, it's better to punch people than block.
Oh yeah, that's one of my critiques. You want to be uppercutting as opposed to trying to jump for a block, because you don't really jump high.
You don't.
Like when you go for a block, you're not jumping very high.
I was running through the tutorial. Do you know how many times it took me to complete the tutorial, but we get past the blocking stage? It was ridiculous.
I actually did it. I'm not trying to sound elitist here, but I did it on the first try. But it's still not a good mechanic.
Yeah, no,
it's not. But
actually, the funny thing is, I did it a couple of times in the tutorial, and it got the block, but it didn't count as a block for some reason as well. So, and that made me even more frustrated. Anyway, that's just the tutorial, but it is, as you said, indicative of that underlying problems with the blocking mechanic. So there's little things like that, but apart from that, I can see it is a very well-made game. It is certainly well beyond what the early access PBA game is, and it does play better, and it's got a lot of interesting features there and a story mode and everything, and I can see the potential in it. It may or may not turn out to be a game for me. Maybe it's just a bit too over the top for me. That could be the case, but I do think in general it is a well-made game with some good ideas. It probably does need to have some of those mechanics fixed, like the blocking. Are they still working on it? Do you know?
I don't know. I know that it's no longer in early access. One thing I did want to point out, though, with Dunk Lords that I really enjoyed is the soundtrack. I really like the soundtrack between menus and all of that stuff. It's memorable. My brother and I already have downloaded it and whatnot on on YouTube, and we listen to it, which is
it is a good soundtrack, which is important for games.
Yeah, and when you get into the story mode, which is actually there's a lot of replayability with that. When you get into the story mode and you go to different stages, there's different songs and whatnot, and it's just really cool. The soundtrack as well. And I'll say what I like about it is the fact that it knows it's over the top, but I think that it executes the over the top well.
Sure. I would agree.
Once you get used to the signature styles, and that's what they are. They're signature styles. You have signature moves, you have signature skills.
Character
the Bear Merlin in the game, he can't shoot, so you have to use him like Shaq and mostly dunk with him. There is a skill gap in the game, and I like the fact that you have so many options in order to impact the game. You have the dash ability, talk people over. You have the special skill, which is the B button, and then if you hold down the B button, you have a second special skill, and all of that stuff. There's just so many different ways to impact the game, and I just think it's fun. And I said this in the PBA basketball review. I said the number one best way to play these games is with two people. You know that.
Yeah.
There's no online matchmaking in Dunk Lords like I thought there might have been, so that's unfortunate. But my brother and I laughed so hard playing Dunk Lords, and we just have such a good time playing on the same team as well and going through the story mode together, which is another huge feature that they did right. You can play the entire story mode with two players locally.
Yes, that is important. It's a lost art. Yeah. A lost art.
And you can do gauntlets. So like what you said, one thing that I really appreciate about this game is it's polished.
Yeah,
it's a very well-made, well-thought-out basketball game for a small development team, and I'm glad that I have it. It has its faults, but I'm glad that it's part of my collection.
I think for me that there is so much, as you say, to the experience that perhaps I'd say I felt a bit overwhelmed by everything, and the fact that it seemed like I was losing control of the ball way too easily, just losing the ball back to the CPU too often. And again, this does come down to skill gaps and whatnot, but I also think that arcade games should be very much pick up and play. Like, again, that is another strength of the NBA Jam games throughout the generations, is that they are very easy to pick up and play. I felt this one, there's a bit more to it, which is not a bad thing. I think I just felt a little bit put off by it at the start, that it felt a bit, I don't want to overuse.
Andrew, it's insane.
Yeah,
the action is insane. Wait until you try the story mode.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of, for me, it's kind of an issue like that, and I may or may not get it. I don't regret picking it up. I budget for these things. I budget for some of the games I picked up recently, kids sports, basketball, for example. I don't think anything will top that or jam it. In fact, nothing. I think that is the bottom line. That is the bottom of the barrel. I will play NBA Live 07 on 360 every day, for the next 5 years before I, play Jam it on a regular basis, except to laugh at it, of course. So I mean, I do budget for these things. I don't regret getting it. I may change my mind, and that is the great thing about a lot of games that you go back to, basketball or otherwise, that you do reserve the right to change your mind. My initial impressions are that it may not be for me, that it may be a bit too insane, which is, again, and this is why it's important, I think, when evaluating a game, to not only just you give your personal opinion, of course, and whether you like it or not, but whether you could recommend it to somebody else. If you can look past, and people talk about an unbiased review, and people say, how can you do an unbiased review? Because obviously it's your opinions. But when people talk about unbiased reviews, I think they are talking about being able to put the bias aside and say, okay, well, this is my general opinion of the game, but I can also critique it and note the positives, even if I don't necessarily like the idea or the concept. And I can put it out there and give somebody else an idea of whether they would like it or not. And I think if you are definitely open to the concept, and it does take some time to get used to, don't go into it expecting... I mean, it is similar to other arcade basketball games. It is where it has no fouls and things like that. Some of the concepts are quite universal to arcade basketball games. But don't expect it to play like an NBA Jam or NBA Street or something like that, because it is over the top, insane, crazy, frenetic. For me, whether I can get used to that and come to enjoy it, and when I get used to it and all the mechanics and the characters and everything, I want to give it more of a go. That remains to be seen. But I can put it out there and say that it has some these are the features that it has, and that may sound good to some other people, and I think it's something that people could come to enjoy. Whether I will or not remains to be seen. But that's, I think, the important thing about giving an unbiased and a fair review and a fair evaluation for other people listening, as a content creator, whatever, to whether they want your recommendation or not. I wouldn't not recommend the game. I mean, I would say if you're like me, maybe it's not going to be for you either, as it may not be for me in the long run. But I think there's a lot of good there. I think it is very polished outside of a couple of features. Again, the blocking, as you noted. But yeah, I think it is worth looking at, and it is worth, I think, for me personally, it is worth more of my time to see if I do enjoy it. And if not, I gave it a go, and it's a new game out there on the market, and I think that's important.
Here's my just my final recommendation if anybody ends up buying this game. I think that when you're playing your first few games, use Slice. That's his name. Use Slice, and what I'd recommend for you is, and so you can really see the differentiation between the two characters, is use Slice and use Marlin, which is the bear, and just play a few games that way and get used to those two skills, because those are the two, probably the two most different players that are in the game. But yeah, I think the good thing is that you can see that the game is well made, and this is again proof that even if a game is well made, it's just not going to be for everybody.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said about that.
That's where the unbiased review comes in. Why things like saying, "Oh, it's trash," it's a bad game. To be able to separate into, it's not appealing to me, but it's still well made. And I think that's, it's funny to bring up Roger Ebert, because there's obviously a big thing with the late Roger Ebert about him arguing about games, whether they were art or not, like movies. But when he would review movies, he would also consider the target audience and whether it succeeded at what it was trying to do. So he wasn't going to compare Gone with the Wind to American Pie, for example, or vice versa. It's about the target audience. It's about succeeding at what something tries to do, and whether it can, whether it's personal, on top of whether it's personally appealing. So I think that is the right way to review anything, quite frankly. It's part of the building blocks of being able to give a fair review. And again, when people talk about an unbiased review, it's kind of a contradiction in terms, when you put it that way. But it's really about being able to put that personal bias aside, give your opinion and your verdict and a recommendation, but also give people enough information about it, and also be able to say, well, it doesn't appeal to me, but if you like this, it will appeal. So that's ultimately what we're talking about when we say unbiased review, that we can put bias aside, that it's not just, this comes from a company I hate, or I don't like this particular mechanic, therefore this mechanic is bad. It could be a good mechanic, right. It's just not for you. Yeah.
Right, exactly. There's 2 points I want to make about that. Batman Arkham Knight is an amazing game, and I would recommend it to people, but I won't play it. It's not my type of game.
Yeah.
Like the way that Batman Arkham Knight is, it's a beat-em-up style game and whatnot, and it's not a game that I would, spend a lot of time with or put on. But would I recommend the game as far as saying, hey, this is a really well-made game, and if you like beat-em-up style games, this is for you? Yeah, of course I would. I would still put my seal of approval on it. And the other point I wanted to make really quick, on as far as Dunk Lords is, this also speaks to different play styles, right? Because I can guarantee your fun factor, if you were sitting in my living room with me, or I was sitting in your living room and we were playing that game and we were on the same team trying to work our way through a story mode, your impression of the game may be better.
Absolutely.
Like you may have a better impression. So it says something to the difference in play styles, because me sitting here with my brother, I have somebody to share that experience with and learn the game with and work through the story mode and just really enjoy it and pick up on things that you may not pick up on as a single player. So those two points I wanted to make.
Absolutely. And co-op and local co-op and local competitive play, and online co-op and competitive play as well. It is such a different experience. We've seen that before. I've felt that with NBA Playgrounds, playing that with my cousins as opposed to playing it solo. It's definitely a point. And of course, being able to be taught by somebody who's more experienced and be carried, or sometimes, or at least kind of figure things out with somebody is part of a very different experience. This is, again, something I thought that was so great and underrated about NBA Jam on Fire Edition, that you could play both when you went through the road trip mode in NBA Jam on Fire Edition, that you could play local co-op or also online co-op and go through the road trip together. I thought that was an awesome feature. So many things about On Fire Edition. I really need to get around to doing it for a Way Back Wednesday night, because it is such a tremendous game. People are really down on the EA Sports Jam games, and I think some of that does come down to disdain for the brand, because those games are right up there with some of the other best games from Midway, quite frankly, and have done some things that just weren't possible back in the day that Midway probably would have liked to have done. But anyway, I do have to get around to that. But yeah, it does come down to that.
It's about replayability, though, and I want to point this out with Dunk Lord, sorry for interrupting you, is, and for listeners who might want to pick it up, the story mode takes about 3 hours to get through.
Yeah,
it's like 25,
which is pretty good replay value for an arcade game.
Yeah,
pretty
but
good
you got to realize, too, we found this out after. Once you beat it on the regular level, there's a new
game plus
version of the same mode. Game Plus, excellent, and you get to jump in and do it again on a harder level for another 3 or 4 hours. And then Gauntlet takes a while because it's on the hardest level and you've got to win 4 games in a row. So outside of your regular exhibition play and all of that stuff, even without online, you could probably get, just off of those modes, around 7, 8, 9, 10 hours, which isn't bad for a $20 game. And then, like I said, if they come out with a Dunk Lords 2 and sharpen up some of the things that we talked about and put some online matchmaking or let you play online co-op in the story mode or something like that, I mean, how much replayability would that add? So there's still room for growth, too.
Absolutely. And to your point about the Arkham Knight series, it's, with me, I can have a similar example with when it compares Fallout to the Elder Scrolls, like Skyrim and Oblivion and whatnot. Bethesda makes both of those games, both of those series. I have played Elder Scrolls as well. I think they are fine games. It's been harder for me to get into it, which is funny because I love Game of Thrones, so it's not like I'm anti-fantasy or something like that. But I much prefer the tone, the universe, the lore of Fallout, and also having guns as opposed to just bows and arrows for ranged combat in a game that has shooter mechanics. But I prefer the Fallout aesthetic and lore and universe and stories to and that doesn't. I'm not saying that the Skyrim obviously a fantastic game as well, but I would play New Vegas is actually Obsidian, outsourced to Obsidian, but I would play Fallout 3 or even Fallout 4 ahead of, as much as I have my quibbles with Fallout 4, but another time that's not about basketball games. But I would play that ahead of any Elder Scrolls game, not because I think that they are terrible games, but because simply I prefer the Fallout setting to the fantasy setting of Elder Scrolls. And there's probably a lot of people who feel differently, and there are some people who can go between the two of them. So it does come down to personal taste, and so I will give it more of a go. I don't regret getting the game at all. I'm not going to seek a refund with under 2 hours played or anything like that. I want it in the collection. I want to give it a go. It'll be a game that I'm, even if I put it aside for months at a time or years, it may be one that I come back to at some point. I mean, I will be coming back to it sooner than that, of course, but I'd like to cover it in some way for the site or talk about it on future podcasts, so it probably won't be that long. But even if I do end up putting it aside for a long time, it may be one that I dust off after some time as well. And that's why I like having the big collection, because you've got the games to try out when you feel like a change of pace. But before we wrap up, on the subject of these games, and it's a bit of a longer episode with our NBA 2K21 impressions, of course. We do thank you for bearing with us on this jumbo episode. But one last game we wanted to talk about this week was NBA Playgrounds, the original one. We did a whole episode where we talked about NBA 2K Playgrounds 2. Playground People, the game and its sequel. You can go back and listen to that. But you actually missed out on the first one the first time around, and but you do have it now. You got a key off eBay, which did work. We talked about that on a previous show that you were looking into doing that. You've got that, and you do have some thoughts on the original Playgrounds.
They absolutely improved on a lot with Playgrounds too.
Yep.
And I just want to point out, there's a slew of issues with Playgrounds. One, and a couple of them are your stamina running out so quickly. And you can swipe for one steal and it takes your bar almost down completely.
Oh yeah,
like just
I remember.
For one swipe, which means you can't, you're not moving fast, you can't jump for blocks, all of that stuff. You can only do one dribble move and it has to be a dunk right after, or you have to go for a layup because your stamina runs out so fast. So basically, you feel discouraged from even trying to run up the floor once into a dunk because your meter might run out before you get to the hoop. So you're like sludging up and down the court, you're not willing to do dribbling moves, just trying to get to a point where you get to the hoop and you can actually dunk. So it's a huge problem. Timing for rebounds and blocks isn't even close to as good in the original Playgrounds. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Rebounding isn't very fun. You also have this issue where the CPU just can't block you. Like if you use somebody like Dirk Nowitzki out on the 3-point line, and like my brother literally walks up to the 3-point line and just keeps shooting threes, and he can get them off whenever he wants, and he's shooting at this like ridiculously high percentage as well. But the biggest problem isn't the fact that you can hit threes at a high rate and not get blocked with somebody like Dirk. It's the fact that you miss so many dunks when you're right in the green zone, and this is a problem with NBA 2K21. And I'm using James Worthy, a prolific dunker, one of the best dunkers in NBA history, and I missed 6 dunks in a row with the cursor right in the middle of the window, and I just kept missing dunks over and over and over and over again. And how off-putting is that?
It is.
We lost that game.
I still feel like that's kind of a problem in 2K Playgrounds too, but they did clean it up a lot. It is noticeably improved in the sequel.
Yeah, it's so anyway, my impressions of NBA Playgrounds is I'm glad that I have it in my library. I only had to pay $5 for the key. That's a bonus. And it's something that we're playing through. One thing that I will say that I like a lot better about NBA Playgrounds, the original, there's 2 different things. One, the fact that you can use players from different teams and play on the same team. So like while I'm using James Worthy, he's using Dirk Nowitzki, and we can still play on the same team as opposed to me using James Worthy and him having to use somebody off the Lakers. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so that's
right.
one thing that I better about the original.
I forgot about that. Yeah, I forgot about that.
It's a huge thing. I mean, it definitely adds to the element of enjoyment and flexibility. The other thing that I like a lot better is instead of the season mode, I love the map. I love the playing in different cities. The having 4 challenges, and once you complete the 4 challenging the games, that you get a pack, right? You don't just get 1 pack; you get like 4 packs.
Yeah,
4 or 5 packs.
Much more generous.
I like the right, exactly, and I like the atmosphere of different music and different courts when you go to different cities. You know what I mean? So I definitely like that aspect better. I like the way the depth and the functionality of the modes work better. But as far as between the lines gameplay, I would still go back, and we talked about how that's most important. If it really comes down to it and I'm going to pick up a game to play, I'm choosing Playgrounds 2.
And it remains to be seen whether we'll see another one, because Sabre is currently working on the next WWE game, the spin-off, not WWE 2K, of course, but rather the WWE Battlegrounds, which again, obviously they work with 2K on 2K Playgrounds too, so that they're kind of taking over there as well with that standalone. That's the game that they're working on, so it doesn't look like they're going to be another Playgrounds game anytime soon.
Yeah, exactly, and then that's a shame. And I look at games like Dunk Lords, and I look at the games like Playgrounds and stuff like that, and it just makes me sad. Right? Like, yeah. I'm not saying that the Dunk Lords 2 won't come out, but, what if that's a one-off release? Right? Yeah, why not build on that? You made, with NBA Playgrounds, you made improvements from the original Playgrounds to Playgrounds 2. Why not stay consistent with it? And I think we need more consistency in the arcade space.
And certainly, arcade games in particular don't need to be annual releases, but certainly, I mean, you look at what happened with Jam to Jam Tournament Edition a year later. You look at how many editions of Street Fighter 2 there were. there's still room to have those expansion packs, especially these days when it's more feasible to update games post-release. It didn't have to be a new cartridge or a new ROM chip or whatever. So it's just, I mean, there's only so much you can do to upgrade. Sometimes you need to design from a brand new game. And if that's the case, then like I said with 2K Playgrounds 2 when it was coming out, I don't mind there being back-to-back releases in the arcade space if it's a better game, if it's an enhanced version, much like On Fire Edition was to NBA Jam 2010 or Tournament Edition was to the original NBA Jam. It's like anything. It comes down to how well is it done. Is it worth doing? And sometimes the answer is yes, and it is well done. In which case, no harm, no foul there. So it doesn't need to be, these games, they don't need to be annual releases, especially if there's enough content. And that's the big thing about arcade games, is giving them enough content to make them hold up. The depth of a new game plus, or additional content coming through, or challenges or something like that. And I think that's something where Playgrounds 2 did fall a bit short. And maybe if they do ever make a Playgrounds game, they need to think about that. But again, I would love to see a new NBA Jam game. Back the truck up, pay Tim Kitzrow, whatever he wants to voice that, because you absolutely need Tim Kitzrow doing the voice in to be the announcer of NBA Jam. Bring in some of the people who work on Fire Edition. Bring in Trey Smith. Bring in the developers there, and look at what made those games great, and make a new NBA Jam game, because it's a shame that such a classic franchise was brought back for a couple of years, kind of milked for a couple of years, with a couple of good games, mind you. It wasn't just, they didn't just cash in with a couple of subpar Jam games. The EA NBA Jam games are underrated and very, very good. On Fire Edition, maybe one of the best, if not the best, arcade basketball games that certainly I've ever played, and I believe overall, for that matter, I will argue, I will advocate for that. And it is a shame that NBA Jam remains dormant, because it is such a recognizable brand. The games are so good. They do things that they set the standard for the arcade basketball gaming experience. I want a new NBA Jam game. We missed it. We missed it on the last generation. We got Playgrounds, which was a okay substitute. I've had fun with it. You've had a lot more fun with it, and people have enjoyed it. But I want a new Jam game, man.
Give Tim Kitzrow the Kevin Garnett contract.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, give him the big contract. No, I agree. I think that NBA Jam, we've talked about how popular Rocket League was, right?
Yeah.
Like people still want that experience. People still want that crazy experience. It doesn't matter which space it's in. They want that arcade experience. And look at my reaction to Dunk Lords, right? No, it's not the greatest arcade game ever made, but I still yearn for that experience. And I think that a lot of the young crowd still wants that arcade fun and just that loose experience, because there's so much frustration in a lot of different video games, as we've discussed at length here on this podcast. Yeah. There's definitely room in the space for NBA Jam to return and make some serious noise.
So with that being said, we are all, we're very much open to more basketball games being in the space, more sim games. We certainly at least want NBA Live to come back strong. We'd love to see new NBA Jam, maybe alternating with NBA Street every couple of years would be fantastic, because of course these days you can do roster updates for those games. So there's a lot of things we could do that with current games that couldn't be done back in the day, as far as updates and pushing through new content. So that is something that they could do. I'd love to see it happen. As for 2K21, we will continue to cover that moving forward. We will continue to give our impressions of the game, and as how it shapes up with shooting updates, patches, and everything. Of course, Derek, won't be until this new season starts that the game will really take shape as far as being an updated game for the 2021 season. It's going to come down to that, which makes it hard to get into a My League or even My Career at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely hurts that. Like you would say, it also hurts like just my team in general. I think part of the thing is that they knew that what people really, and this is how they've advertised the game, is what people are going to want to do is go on there and create their players, right? They're going to want their builds. They're still going to be playing in the park and all of that stuff, and they're still going to be doing My Career and all that. So I think that they knew that they had legs to stand on based on their depth and based on their business model.
Yep.
So yeah, you knew that was going to happen, but yeah, I don't think that you're going to have a lot of people spending, a tremendous amount of time in My League, as far as, the players still aren't drafted, right?
Yeah.
We still don't know where players are going, and those patches haven't come through.
So that's something that, and again, as we said at the top of the show, that is not 2K's fault. That is just the way of the world at the moment with the pandemic and the effect it's had on the NBA. They are dealing with the situation as best as we all can in these trying times, and but it's more about the underlying mechanics, as we said. But we will circle back to that in future shows. We will continue to play the game, I'm sure, and form our opinions, and I'll have a full review out at some point. I've been meaning to do that for years, but then I end up talking about it on the podcast, and then I don't do a written review. I do want to get back to doing some written reviews on that, and so forth. And I know there'll probably be some more. Obviously, more talk on the podcast and more videos and so forth, and so stay tuned to both the NLSC podcast and of course what you're doing, Derek, on your YouTube. We will, either way, we'll have plenty to say about these games moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. No, and thank you for tuning into both. I just want to point that out. I had a bunch of people comment who listened to the NLSC podcast, and they watched the Virtual Hoop Dreams episode 1 with me and Swag. So, I've said this before. I don't care if it's NLSC, NLVC. I don't care who it is. We can all be, friendly with each other. And I think that we can all talk basketball gaming and talk about the right things and all of that stuff because, the most important thing is, and I'll say again, is that we're getting great basketball games. And if that's what we all want, there's no competition here. And I think it says a lot about the basketball community that we have at the NLSC, that we can support multiple platforms and multiple influencers and all of that stuff. So I just want to say thank you to those who, tune into both.
Ditto, absolutely. And it's, again, we are, at the end of the day, all one community spread throughout the internet and its various platforms and sub-communities. So absolutely, it's no malice, and it's all about getting along and standing with each other and enjoying the games and also putting out the constructive feedback when we're not so happy with them. But to that end, we turn the discussion over to you now. Let us know your thoughts on our thoughts and your thoughts on the games in general and some of the other topics that we talked about. The initial impressions of NBA 2K21, the big news with Scott O'Gallagher and Rob Jones, and some of the other games that we've been playing recently. Let us know. You can let us know in the comments of the bulletin on the front page where this podcast is posted on the main page of the NLSC. Also in the forum, the dedicated thread in the NLSC Hub section. Of course, on YouTube where we are now, you can comment there, and on social media as well. But the podcast does come out each and every week, every Sunday. It comes out on the NLSC, of course, which is nba-live.com. We're also uploaded to our YouTube channel. We're also on various podcatching apps and platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Blueberry, Podcast Addict, a bunch of them, pretty much all of them. If you can't find it on your platform of choice, let me know and I'll submit the RSS feed. But I'm guessing if you're listening to the show, you probably know where to find it. But nevertheless, if you want to subscribe on those platforms to get it delivered to your platform of choice, please do. Please feel free to leave us a review on those platforms that allow reviews. Hopefully a 5-star positive review with some nice comments. We'll see if we can read some of them out on future shows. But we definitely appreciate any reviews there and support of the show in general. And as we say, as long as you're tuning in and enjoying the show each and every week, that is the main thing. Before I get to the NLSC socials, Derek, where can we find you?
So I have a lot going on at the moment. You can tune in to Holding Court with D for 3. I just released episode 3. That's discussing mostly Real Hoop. That's on Apple Podcasts. It's on Stitcher, Podcast Addict. It's going to be uploaded to my YouTube channel today, and it's on various other, as you say, pod-catching platforms, which I love. That's a tongue twister, but I love it. I'm also releasing a series called Virtual Hoop Dreams with Swaggy P. Lino, who has been an EGA game changer for some time. He's a great guy. There was good reception to the episode 1, which we uploaded to YouTube, so definitely tune into that when new episodes are uploaded. Or if you haven't checked it out, get on there and check it out. I'm also on the NLSC as a contributor, D for 3. I'm on Twitter at D for 384, and on YouTube, D for 3.
Definitely great to check out those videos. I highly recommend it. And once again, thank you for the kind words and the shout out during the Virtual Hoop Dreams episode 1, and shout out to Swaggy, of course, as well. I'm in the forum with the creative name of Andrew. I'm on Twitter at AndrewNLSC. Follow me there for my various rants about this and that, NBA, real basketball, video games, and whatnot. The NLSC is on Facebook and Twitter at the NLSC. We're on Instagram is NLSC Basketball. Our YouTube is NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nba-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. But yes, that's all for this week. We thank you for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.